It is 6 p.m. and I am going to call to order the August 5th, 2024 meeting of the Concord Select Board. Welcome, everyone. We are going to start with 15 minutes of public comment. Please limit your time to 3 minutes and address topics that aren't on the agenda. So do I have someone who'd like to speak? Sure, go ahead.
Virginia Lee, 162 Plainfield Road, Concord. I'm here because Mary Weinberg asked me to say a few comments after.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Oh, yeah, why not?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Seems like a good idea. I'm here to make a few comments because I went on Mary's Monday tour. She has these Monday tours, so I went to one of them, and then I followed up with going back to Duro Park on yesterday. So I just had some comments and wanted to share them with you. While I'm at it on parks, I just wanted to mention, which I've already gone over, about White Pond. Something needs to be done about the signs that are kind of all falling apart and looking terrible. So the sign that went up, the first sign that went up was a kind of near neon blue sign, which I'm not sure why that kind of fits in with the beautiful naturalist environment, but it was kind of neon-y, and then I kind of ignored that. But then as the other unsightly signs went up, I just let her know, Carrie know, that maybe somebody should go over there and clean it up because it looks pretty messy. And then somehow a giant bed sign, like for an Amber Alert, went up last week, and then somebody took it down. I think it was saying members only. It was like a flashing thing. So somebody took that down. So there were, at one point last week or the week before, 4 signs up for White Pond. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention. And then I'm sure somebody will follow up on that and make it look more beautiful. At any rate, so Mary, who's done so much for West Concord, and Concord has apparently taken on making some improvements over at Duro Park. I'm just making some comments. I don't want you to think that I'm being critical. I'm just saying what I saw, kind of as an unbiased person just going to an event that Mary threw. The first point was that my husband, we were taking some pictures over there, and we were standing in front of the chicken fencing area, and it goes down, and the asphalt that connects to the grass is at an incline, so he was falling, and I caught him. So I would hope that somebody would go over there and do something about the incline, because it's a very common place that people would take pictures. It's in front of one of the crescent-shaped masonry areas. And then that led me to the question of why is there unattractive chicken fencing? That just seemed strange to me. And then, could just have a fence and keep people from falling down rather than falling into the chicken fencing, which is a big disaster. Up the hill from Duro, the Bruce Freeman Trail has wood fencing that keeps people from falling down. If you're walking from the prison towards Acton, on the right, there's beautiful wood fencing, kind of like Western look. And I thought that might be something that you would want to consider to make the Duro Park safer. The Bruce Freeman Trail has signage that respects the history of the area, and I thought you might want to take it into consideration. They call it Warner's Pond in the White Row neighborhood, so when you're bicycling along, you stop and you see, oh, I'm at this place, it's Warner's Pond. And so I didn't know whether or not Duro Park would have consistent signage, such as Duro Park at Warner's Pond. To my surprise, the design of the park seems more like a bathroom stop, and I just feel so bad to even say that.
I got to tell you, can you wrap it up? It's 3.5 minutes.
Oh, it's already 3.5 minutes. Okay, so I should probably stop there because
do you want to just leave us with one final point? Maybe your most important point?
I think it would be that I could sit down with people and mention my comments in a not so speedy way. Who would I mention my comments to that would be helpful?
Why don't you send them to me?
Can I just tell you them, or do I have to? These are notes that I wrote because I was just going to.
Sure, if you want to just give a call to the office and we'll set a time up to talk.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
At least you heard the most important part, which was my husband safety.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
you
that was
did.
most important. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mary?
Mary Weinberg, Hillside Avenue. Hidden behind a curtain of overgrowth and dozens of newly planted trees, which will grow to block the views, I strained hard to see the quiet beauty, the cooling and restorative energy of the waters of Giroux Park's Warner's Pond. The Concord residents' approval for the purchase of the late Mrs. Giroux's land and creation of Giroux Park was voted on at town meeting 2018 with the verbal and visual slide presentations with photos and drawings made by the town of Concord established the pond as the major use and prime focus, the soul and focal point of Giroux Park. Yet, 7 years from its inception, I'm blocked by overgrown brush and dozens of newly planted trees to see the original focal point. I'm blocked to see the dark, cooling waters, the three swans swimming together as if in a ballet, the ducks, the blue heron flying overhead, the Canada geese gliding along the pond in a perfectly straight line, the mirrored image in the pond's waters of blue skies and soft white billowy clouds. I'm blocked from overgrowth to see the colors of lime and deep greens around the water's edge, to gaze upon one of the pond's smaller islands of brilliant green vegetation surrounded by the restful waters. A scene, no doubt, Monet would have been inspired to paint. A scene Monet would have immortalized. All this, a scene that could be an idyllic setting in France, only 3 miles from my home. How can I not speak out when I witness such beauty that has been muffled? First step. Our elected officials work together with the community to identify and clear the overgrowth to quote-unquote free the views to Giroux Park's Warner's Pond. Together, we will fulfill the mandate of Article 25, Town Meeting 2018, and Mrs. Giroux's wishes. We've had 2 successful I Want to See the Pond information walks, and the next one is scheduled for Monday, 6 p.m., August 12th. We'll meet at the pavilion, rain or shine.
Thank you, Mary. Any other public comments?
There's one on Zoom if I can
Okay,
speak.
wait just a second. I just want to make sure, pause for a moment, none in the room. Okay, great, yeah. Who's on Zoom?
This is Sandeep Pishardi, resident at Haywood Mill Road in Concord. I want to speak up today to advocate for the establishment of India Day in Concord. This would not only celebrate the rich cultural heritage of India, but also honor the contributions of our Indian American community here. India has a lot of diverse traditions, vibrant festivals, profound history, and does have a lot to offer in terms of cultural enrichment and mutual understanding. The India Day proclamation, which is on the agenda for later today, would serve as a testament to our town's inclusive nature. It would acknowledge not only the Indian community here, but their role in the town's growth and prosperity, from local businesses to education and civic engagement. I do want to highlight one thing, though, the spirit of India's struggle for independence, which is what culminated in the Indian independence on August 15th. It resonates deeply with our own town's history of standing against colonial rule. Just as we over here fought bravely for freedom and self-determination, the people of India waged a non-violent struggle against British colonialism led by Mahatma Gandhi. And Gandhi's own philosophy of non-violent resistance, as you might recognize, was profoundly influenced by our own Henry David Thoreau in his seminal work, Civil Disobedience. This connection highlights the powerful impact of our town's heritage and what it's had on global movements for justice and equality. Recognizing this India Day, we not only celebrate a culture that's an integral part of our community, but also promote unity, respect, and cultural exchange. This India Day proclamation would embrace and honor the multicultural essence, and that makes this town truly special, while acknowledging the shared values that bind us through history. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else online? Do we have anyone else?
Hi, I have a comment.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Scott Spigler, 1266 Monument Street. So I believe your most important job as a select board, beyond hiring a town manager is to create and oversee policy. And as you do this work on behalf of all residents, we expect you to be thoughtful, objective, and to put your own ideologies and interests aside in order to create policy that's wise and that brings us together. And respectfully, I believe that the residential tax exemption adopted last year was not good policy. And I hope the Select Board will reflect on the results of last year's Select Board election and see it for what it was, what I believe it was, which was a mandate for reconsideration and I hope change. And I hope that you'll, as you reconsider come November, that you'll reverse course and think about how you can unwind the policy, because ultimately I do think that for all residents over the long term, it will have negative consequence. So I heard a couple of concerns at the Select Board meeting where the RTE was voted in, and I do believe these concerns remain true. The first is that the residential tax exemption was not designed for communities like Concord. And in fact, the RTE guide from the Department of Local Services called Living with a Residential Exemption shared that not a single municipality similar to Concord had adopted this policy, and that communities that chose to adopt the exemption often have the following characteristics. Large cities or towns with many non-owner occupied properties like apartment buildings, and resort communities with many seasonal residents. And in fact, across the 16 municipalities that were cited as having adopted the RTE are 6 vacation communities across the Cape, Vineyard, and Nantucket, and 10 larger cities with a median population of 63,000, which is 3 times Concord's. Second, residential tax exemption makes sense for cities like Boston, Brookline, Cambridge, and Cape towns like Truro, but I do believe it's bad policy for communities like Concord. Its lack of predictability can impact all residents over time, particularly those more sensitive to fluctuating property taxes. Again, if you take the long term into account. And 3, I do believe there are better solutions for helping vulnerable members of the community. The refrain given by the chair of the Select Board at the time when the RTE was passed was that it was a blunt instrument, but it's the best we had. And I don't believe that's true. The RTE was a seemingly quick and easy solution, but policy is the job of Select Board, and there are always consequences in the long run for bad policy. And I do think that we can do better to help the people we want to help if we spend time and think it through. So eventually, I do believe this policy in time will be reversed as its negative consequences become reality. And the longer the Select Board takes to reverse last year's action, the more risk I ultimately believe you will pose on citizens. So again, please take a step back, see the forest for the trees, and consider unwinding this policy come November to mitigate its long-term consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other people on Zoom? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, good. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. Would people like anything pulled off of the consent agenda?
I did have a couple, I would like the proclamation on Indian Day. I just had a couple of clarifying questions.
Go ahead. Let's pull that off. I want to pull off the minutes because I have a very small change to make to the minutes.
All right. So we'll cover those 2 things in a minute. I would like to acknowledge the gift from Coeur Lion Commandery,
Yes.
number 34, to the town 250th gift account, which we just established in the amount of $500 in honor of Maynard Forbes. And I move that we adopt the consent agenda, reserving the India Day proclamation and the minutes of July 22nd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let me do the minutes first, Cameron, because it's very small. The minutes on page 6. I'm going to page 6 of the minutes. The 3rd paragraph down, it says, Ms. Hartman focused on the need for the funds that keep people supportive of this initiative with the strong source of funding that we had hoped for. It should be without the strong source of funding that we had hoped for. Small, okay?
Page 6 of
Yeah,
the
page 6 of the, I'm
page 6
sorry,
of the packet. Sorry, yeah. Focus on the
of the minutes, yes. 3rd paragraph.
Yep.
So, in other words, we lost our source, so, okay. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, very good. Okay.
Okay.
Now, the next one would be the proclamation.
Yeah, so,
Cameron.
so a quick question, which is just, I saw it for August 15th, but I also saw emails talking about things on August 10th and August 14th. So that was just a
Yeah.
quick clarifying question of like, what is the date?
Great. So I was going to highlight a couple of things. So as some of you know, there was consideration of being a flag raising, which would be a specific day, but this would be a proclamation that we would be making in support of the India Day activities. There is a celebration for India Day at First Parish on Saturday, August 10th at 1 p.m. And the reason I'm mentioning that specifically is if there's anyone in the select board who would be interested or able to read the proclamation out at that, there's a request for that. The other activities around this particular event include crafting at the Fowler Library on August 14th and 15th. India Day, the India Independence Day is actually August 15th. It's just there are a number of community events that are scheduled at other times. So that umbrella, there's a number of community groups that are co-sponsoring and participating in the events on August 10th, the Town of Concord India Day celebration, as well as I
I'll
mentioned.
volunteer to read the proclamation
Thank you,
unless
Terry.
someone else wants to.
And that would be 1 p.m.
1 p.m. on August 10th.
All right. And then, so just, and my second question was maybe broader than just India Day, but have we celebrated other country independence? Like, is this the first time we're doing this, or?
This
Do
is
we
the
know? I don't
This is the first time that we're doing India Day, and it's in response, as you saw in the community comment, to the fact that people in our community are gathering to celebrate Indian independence as,
Yeah, no, I'm asking because of the precedent, right? So do we as a select board, do we as a town, it's like, so any country that says, hey, I'm gonna celebrate I want to celebrate my day, we want a proclamation that, because it does sort of open in my mind, sort of says, okay, if we're gonna do that, then we should do it for anybody who says, I want to celebrate something for my country, right?
But we do proclamations for more than just countries. And
No, I
actually
understand. Yeah.
but this one does have events associated with it as well, not necessarily in the proclamation, but.
Right.
so we
I
often
think it's
do,
a question of
we often do
precedent, right?
proclamations in support of community events
Yeah.
that represent celebrations of various kinds and activities as part of our support and promotion of the community as a place to gather and, celebrate the diversity of the heritages that make up our community.
Right, no, I got that, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
so, I'm just curious, so, it just to me means that if there's anybody who says, I want to celebrate, I'm having a celebration for, pick a country, pick a nationality,
Yep.
anybody who
Yep.
say, well, then,
Right.
I want to do this, it feels to me like this now becomes something that, as a precedent, we would say, okay, if we're celebrating India Day, we should celebrate
Yeah.
anyone who's
Right.
having an activity for celebrating their
Yes.
country. And so
You're right.
I just want to be clear on what
Right.
we're saying.
Yep.
It's not that I'm anti-India Day.
Well,
It's
right.
just I'm
Yeah.
sort of saying like, hey, then,
You're right.
that is how do we
Yes.
feel about that precedent? Because it feels to me like, okay, therefore we will be in the business of any country, anyone from any country can, we should be doing a proclamation if they ask for it.
Yeah, you're right. I think this would be a precedent. And I think there's 250 countries in the world, so it does open the door. But we want to be welcoming to a diverse community. So I feel that we should say yes, but yeah, I think if another country comes in with another celebration and events, we would say yes again.
I was just trying to think, you asked about the precedent. We did do one for Ukraine. recently
Yes,
also.
that's right, we
And
did.
I think it's important that we do these proclamations. I'm kind of curious on how they get identified and who puts them forth and what that process is. I don't know what that process is. I'm new to the board, so.
So I can talk to that a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that what we're looking for, or what really occurs, is that they come forward from people in our community who are gathering, who are celebrating something that is part of either their heritage, their activities they enjoy. We have a lot of celebrations, and I think it contributes to both the tourism interest, the economic vitality, and frankly, the enjoyment of the community. And one of the reasons why we issue the proclamations, I mean, we celebrated a wheel of cheese here.
I know, I was going to say, I wait for closer.
You know, there is the element of it. You know, it's nice to have a celebration, and when we issue a proclamation, what we're really doing, I think, is endorsing the spirit of cooperation, cohabitation, and collaboration that comes along with it. And so I do recognize the fact that we could get a request from almost anything, and I'm not saying that I would necessarily agree with every single request. I think the proclamation was included in the packet. It references quite a few of the shared values that we hold up, including democracy and self-determination, which I think are extremely important to Concordians. And that's why I think we would consider any request, and if it meets the criteria of local involvement and alignment with values as we see them, then we should move affirmatively to support it.
I certainly support it. And I think you spoke to it very clearly and concisely, so it reflects our values and it's local sentiment.
I have nothing to add.
Yeah, I mean, for me, listen, it's not, honestly, I bring it up not to say I'm against it or for it, but I just, if we're going to vote for it, to me, it does set up, I just want to be clear, to me, in my mind, it sets a precedent.
It does.
And I don't want to be in the business of then saying, well, we picked this country, but not that country,
Right.
for, for different reasons.
Well,
So if
to me,
somebody brings forward something, it just, in my mind, is like, that's all, just having that conversation.
Well, I think Wendy is correct. I know she's correct. We did do a proclamation for Ukraine. Now, that was a special circumstance with the war.
Sure.
But I'm also thinking we may have done one before any of you were on the board. I'm vaguely remembering there might have been one for Chinese New Year or celebration. But I'm not totally clear on whether we did that or not.
I don't see a downside to it, Cameron. I guess that's what I'm thinking. I mean,
I think that's fine. I just,
okay.
I just, in my mind, I just want to make sure we're having the conversation and just, that I think it does.
You're right.
It
I
does
think
set
you're
a
right.
precedent around this whole country and sort of celebrating other countries' independence days and that kind of thing, right?
Right.
So that I'm just, really nothing more than pointing out other ones could
Yep.
come up, and there's a precedent here. So,
Okay.
Great.
okay.
Okay.
All right, move we approve the proclamation for India Day as distributed in the packet.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to select board appointments.
Okay, my turn to read. Okay. Move to reappoint Lori Klein of 15 Rollingwood Lane to the Library Committee for a second term to expire May 31st, 2027. Move to reappoint Sarah, sorry about this, Passell of 1712 Monument Street to the Library Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2027. Move to appoint John Hinkling of 11 Monument Street as a member of the Concord 250 Executive Committee for a term to expire December 31st, 2026. And move to reappoint Christopher Johnson of 51 Pilgrim Road as a member of the Concord Museum to the Historic District Commission for a term to expire January 1st, 2027.
Second.
That's not what I have on my agenda.
Yeah, I have a, sorry, there's a different thing on my agenda.
Me too.
All right.
Something about Christopher Johnson to the Concord 250,
Right.
as opposed to the
Yeah, it's not a
Let's-
reappointment.
No, I know.
And
but
it's
it
a
was also
different
name.
person. Yeah, it's a different person.
Okay, let's double check that.
This was what we had in front of us.
Yeah,
Chris Johnson of 51 Pilgrim Road,
Right, yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, oh, that's right, so this, yeah, the agenda has it, right? But the agenda. Yeah, the agenda has it.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, which is correct then?
Christopher
The
Johnson,
agenda.
pretty sure.
Oh,
That's
sorry,
what I
yeah,
said.
Sorry. To the 250th, yeah.
Right.
To
Do
the
you have that?
250th? Okay, sorry, okay, I see what it is. The motion is different from the agenda,
Right.
sorry.
Right.
So I was reading the motion.
Right.
So I'm going to
Okay.
correct the motion to move to reappoint Christopher Johnson as a
No,
no,
member of
just
the...
appoint.
Just regular appoint.
Okay. Christopher Johnson as a member of the Concord 250 Executive Committee for a term to expire December 31st, 2026.
Do I
Sorry,
have a
thank
second?
you for the
Second.
correction.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Okay, town managers report.
Thank you and good evening. I wanted to first provide an update on Giroux Park. We had our weekly check-in meeting today to see, to review the progress of the last week. The pavers are 70% reset. I think I mentioned to you at the last meeting. In order to reset the pavers, the contractor has had to clean the pavers because there's a lot of material around them from being exposed without a roof over the pavilion for a lengthy period of time. So that's slow. I think we have about a week and a half or 2 weeks tops left on that, but we are getting close. For anybody who's been out there, you probably will notice that aside from the trees, the contractor has been maintaining the property. The property has been mowed, and I think it looks relatively nice, all things considered. We are still looking at the issue of the landscaping and the trees, and I'm sorry this is taking as long as it is. It's interesting, though, the only entity that has been with this project throughout is GPI, the project manager, right? We've had a change in internal project managers, and while several staff members who are working on it now were with the town when this project started, they weren't working on this project. And so just trying to understand what decisions were made when, so we can succinctly respond to the tree issue. It's just taking a little bit more time than I had hoped, but we are getting to the end of that. I wanted to mention with regard to self-service that the RFP for Emerson Umbrella was issued last Wednesday. We have had 9 requests so far, including 3 from carriers, some from telecommunications contractors. We've had 1 or 2 press inquiries, and we did have a law firm requesting a copy of the RFP. We did notify the executive director at Emerson Umbrella that we were releasing the RFP. We did meet with the outgoing director and the incoming director a month or 2 ago. We did notify the current director of the release, and Megan Zamuto has a meeting with the director either later this week or next week. We do have walkthroughs scheduled later this month, and proposals are due on September 13th. We are now turning to completion of the RFP for the landfill. We are about 2 weeks out from a final draft on the landfill RFP for cell service. We're working over there to meet multiple objectives. Obviously, we have ongoing CPW activities that need to be accommodated. We're looking at some expansion of the existing solar array. We are looking to add a grid-scale battery over there, working with the Kearsarge, who has the solar array, and then we're looking at the cell tower. So we've got a lot of things going on over there, and we're trying to make room for everything without disturbing any additional property, so it's just taking a little time. But again, we're about 2 weeks out before we send the final draft to legal to review and then get that out on the street. So I would expect that out available for request just after the Labor Day holiday, but it may be sooner than that. I wanted to mention the middle school solar project because I heard some about that last week. And I would say first, anybody who is interested in learning the most up-to-date information on the project, the Light Board, the monthly Light Board meeting is the place to go. The interim CMLP director attends the monthly middle school building committee meetings, and I think on a regular basis provides an update there. But the Light Board is the board to plug into, no pun intended, I guess, to keep up to date. But the CMLP expects the bid on the middle school solar project to be available in 2 to 4 weeks. Once the contract is awarded, the timetable is about 6 months from start to finish there. I just wanted to remind everybody that the project includes both roof-mounted panels and ground-mounted canopies, plus a battery. The current estimates for roof-mounted, the canopies and the battery is all within the budget. We are expecting a likely construction install summer of 2025. So the issue here is we have a new roof on the middle school building. We want to make sure that roof is doing its job, it's tight, before we start adding anything to it, because we don't want to be in a situation where there's a debate over, there's a leak in the roof and everybody's pointing fingers. So we're looking at summer 2025. At that point, the roof has been on the building long enough that we feel comfortable with it and we're able to move forward.
And Carrie, there were some initial estimates on the pilings for the canopies that were really high. Have we been able to get that back into line or under budget? You said everything was within budget, so
Yeah, that's the word that I received from Jason Bulger today, that the estimates are running within budget. And we have a light board, the monthly light board meeting is next Wednesday.
And Carrie, what did you say was the 6-month timetable?
So once the contract is awarded, to completion of that project is about 6 months. So between the contract is awarded, the contractor
Right.
orders the materials, everything is installed, up and running, it's about 6 months.
Which is summer of '25.
Summer of
Got it.
Summer of '25 is what we're looking at.
Great.
I wanted to mention we had our kickoff meeting to talk about pilot programs today. We have representatives from Select Board Mary Hartman, Finance Committee Lois Wassoff, myself and the CFO. We had what I thought was a really great discussion. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel here, but I think we're looking to come up with a program that works for Concord, so that we identified a lot of different points that we need to consider, but I thought it was a really productive meeting, and we're moving forward. I mentioned this out of order. I wanted to let you know that we are looking at issuing probably up to $35 million of the remaining debt for the middle school project in September.
Will that finish it, or is that another tranche?
It will not. We will have some amount remaining, and we don't want to borrow the full amount because right now it doesn't look like we need it, right? The contingency is generally intact.
Mm-hmm.
And we do a borrowing every year as a part of our capital improvement plan, so we will hold a certain amount aside and see what we actually need. So after this, there'll be one additional closeout.
Carrie, what are the interest rates that you're looking at?
So right now, we are looking at about 3.5%.
Yep.
And so we would like to move forward to take advantage of what we think are favorable
Good.
interest rates in this crazy market that we're seeing right now. So we did have a meeting today with our financial advisor, and one of the things that we talked about is doing what they would term a long first coupon. So even if we issue in September, we wouldn't have our first payment due until fiscal '26.
Great.
So we're going to model that and see what that looks like.
So Carrie, a couple of questions. Have we applied yet the stabilization fund, or it would be maybe applied to this set of borrowing?
We have not yet used anything from the stabilization fund. It may we are going to model it and look at first applying to this next issue. If you will recall, we talked about using that debt service or reserving the stabilization fund when we had as close to 100% of the debt service for this project on the tax bill while we were still retiring the last few
Right.
years of debt related to the elementary school. So because we only have partial on right now, we have not used any of the stabilization fund.
Right, but for this next batch, it may time out.
We
yeah.
may, yeah.
Right, and my other question is back to the pilot. Do you guys have good records of what was done in the past here? Like past negotiations and with the institutions so we can learn, you know, what started to work, what didn't work, or I know it's a long time ago, so that's why I don't know if we have good records of it or not.
Well, I'm not aware that we have a lot of records. I think what you're talking about is 15-plus years ago. We certainly will see and consider any work that has been done in the past. But I've not come across anything substantive documenting what was done in the past.
You know who might is Peggy Briggs, who was involved in some of that early on. I think she spoke that when Anthony gave the last presentation.
Or maybe Ruth Lauer might know where they are.
Yeah, so we can,
Okay, great.
we can take a look at that.
Lessons learned.
Yeah, no.
I did,
People online can hear nothing right now. Don't quite know what happened, but would appreciate it if somebody could figure it out. Thank you.
Can you hear us now, Diane? No.
Yes, now we can. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Diane.
okay.
Okay. Okay.
So we have a 250th event this Sunday, August 11th. I'm not sure, gosh, where that just went to. So this is the event to celebrate 250 days until
Yep.
April 19, 2025 at 5:30 PM. We do have that advertised online. Oh, here it is. So 5:30 to 7:30 at the Concord Museum, and at 8 o'clock at Monument Square, there is a lighting ceremony. There are two weekly reports available. One was in the packet, one went out this afternoon, and should be available online now. I know we're running behind, so maybe I'll just leave it at, I will take questions if you have questions.
Anyone have any questions? Great. Thank you, Carrie. Let's move on to the ARPA spending.
Okay, so I did send you something over the weekend, and we were able to update the packet that is available online. Just to recap, the town in 2022 and 2023 received $5,654,719 in ARPA funding. This was a grant from the federal government to offset or help with the impact, financial impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a grant that was received by all cities and towns in the country. And then there was an additional grant program that went out to schools to help schools deal with the impact of COVID. So we had some public discussions about what to do with this money. We gathered lots of input. The select board has had many, many conversations over the years. And the policy that the select board identified was that we would look at programming 20 to 25% of the grant on an annual basis as a part of the budget and capital planning basis. And so I think we did a really good job in '24. So again, the money came in some half in '22, half in '23. We made some initial allocations in '22 and '23. I think we did a really nice job in '24 working through ARPA allocations as a part of the budget and capital planning process. For 2025, I think we did maybe a little bit of less of a good job. We did start on the same path, and we had identified probably about half of the 1.3 million, which would be which would be about a quarter of the funds. We were originally looking at that as part of our capital planning process, and then things were delayed for a variety of reasons. And then we heard about MCI Concord, and I think we weren't really sure, were we going to have to come up with some funding to investigate alternatives, and we just sort of set that aside. So we're in a position where we have yet to complete fiscal 25 allocations. And then based on what we're hearing out of the federal government now, we feel like we would be best positioned to pre-allocate fiscal 26 and make those allocations.
Right.
So we always knew that the regulation was you had to commit the money by December 31st, 2024, and you had to fully expend by December 31st, 2026. But the town of Concord, as most communities who receive $10 million or less in this grant program, the town of Concord was advised to take this grant in as lost revenue. And so we did take it in as lost revenue in 2022 and 2023, and just have worked under the assumption that means, we took it in, we committed it, we programmed it. Now it's our own internal grant to work through. But we don't want to be in a position where the federal government says, you know what, no, we don't agree with what you're doing.
So are there restrictions on what we can spend it on, or?
There are not, because we took it in as lost revenue. So I did include an early memorandum in the packet. This was very early in the process, before the decision or the directive was issued by the federal government that we take it in as lost revenue.
Right. So in the packet, the money that's listed as like FY '22 total, FY '23 total, I assume that's money that's already been spent.
It's been committed for sure, and most of it has been expended. So we are in the process of updating expenditures.
Okay. And then for the money that's in FY '24, again, has that been spent, or sort of a mix of?
It's approved. Be approved? Is that what you mean,
It,
that column?
it is approved, committed, and we're working to update the expenditures.
Okay.
So for example, for the facilities study, 150,000, has that study been started?
It has not yet kicked off. We held that, you may recall, we were without a facilities director. We filled that position. We're getting ready to kick that off.
What about the energy audit, the 100,000?
Yeah,
for the-
that is part of those two projects.
Those two are-
together.
So-
Do you think you'll be able to spend that by?
Yes, that is,
Okay.
probably within this next quarter,
Great.
that will move forward.
So, Carrie, in the spreadsheet, if I look at the bottom of 24, it says there's an unallocated, a remaining balance of 2.6 million. So when you said 20 to 25% per year, so would you assume that half of that would be for 25? Or would we do more than 25? Because 26 is only 6 months.
Yeah,
That's
so
26.
so it is,
Is that something we have to talk about?
Well,
Like, what's the allocation?
I think the best thing to do is to talk about allocating the remaining 2.6. There's nothing that says it has to be 25 and 26. It can all be 25. But when we started down this path several years ago, we talked about the next 4 years and doing 20 to 25% each of the next 4 years. So I did, just for the audience, would like to note, again, we have $2,634,719 unallocated. We have requests of almost $4.6 million.
Sorry, requests from,
These are requests that have been gathered. We have not opened or gone through any formal process to seek applications. We've never done that.
we don't have to do any new projects.
Could you say that again?
Well, if this is our money,
Yep,
Right.
it is.
we could use it to pay the bills and not do any new projects.
We could.
We could use it to lower taxes by $2.6 million.
Which would be completely temporary, and they'd have to go right back up.
No, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we don't have to spend.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah,
for understanding, like,
Technically,
it's
you're
not
right.
like, oh, we have money, we
Right.
have to do a bunch of projects and
Yeah.
spend all
Yeah.
the money. I mean, it's a
Right.
decision.
Yeah, it's fair.
It's a decision as to, like, do we want to do more things and spend more money or not, right?
Well, I think that thinking is,
I'm just saying, like,
right, I think you're right. I think theoretically, because it's lost revenue, there's no restrictions. But I think Mark is right, that when we spend money in the operating budget or to lower taxes, then the following year, we have this huge bump, right? And so, and meanwhile, the capital projects didn't
Right.
get done. So I would not be in favor of a project that added to the operating budget, like by hiring people and all this, but a capital project that's been on the list anyway, that we need to do, is something that we've been trying to do with this ARPA money. So that's been the philosophy.
got it. And I'm more saying it just to
Yeah.
level set, but also.
Hypothetically,
we should
you're
be
right.
Thinking about projects that are high value add, that are gonna deliver,
Exactly.
you know, things that we want, not
Right.
necessarily like, hey, we gotta fill the bucket
Yeah.
just because
No, no,
it's a
no.
use it or lose it
You're
bucket.
right.
That's
You're
right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you could think of it as lowering taxes because we're actually funding things that if
Correct.
we didn't have this money,
We'd have to
we'd
spend
have
it
to
somewhere.
spend, right. And these are valuable to the community. So it's a,
Yes.
right.
I'm just saying
you
we could pave the roads and say, hey,
Yeah.
look, we paved the roads.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And in fact, some of this money is earmarked for road projects.
right, and I actually had some questions about those, but are you going to be going through each of these, or?
well, I wasn't, given the amount of time that was set aside on the agenda, I wasn't expecting to go through each of these. What I would like to do is agree that, you know, by early September, we would know what we're doing with this.
Well, let me tell you what I like about what I see here, just to, would that be helpful to you?
Yes.
Okay. So what I like about this is, some of the things that I see earmarked would be the Doug White Fields, as far as the $100,000 there, and I know you've got some money in the capital budget, but the study, I think that we're hearing a lot from the community about the Doug White Field, so that's something that I was happy to see there. The other thing would be the $500K you have for the Affordable Housing Trust in FY '26, you know, especially since the local transfer fee didn't go through, and we know free cash is low.
Right.
That was another thing that I looked favorably upon. And let me see if I have anything else here. No, those were my two.
And the feasibility,
Keepers.
just to jump on the Doug White Field, is to look at all the options, right? It's not just a replacement, it's trying to figure out what is the right field solution.
Yes.
Is that what it's for?
Absolutely,
Yes.
Right, so
absolutely.
that's one of my questions. Could we
Absolutely.
just spend like 1 minute or less on a couple of these to understand what they are? Like the Baker Avenue culvert and the Main Street Baker Ave intersection. Are these related to the Novo project? Or, I know it's a bad intersection, but could we just say a little bit about what
Big
those
dollar
are?
items, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say from my perspective that the highest need is the culvert. This is a project that was not on the radar.
Right.
It is not in the current capital plan. It is another example. It is the second recent example in the last 5 years of a major culvert failure. We do not have a pot of money set aside for these. And one of the reasons why we requested to be able to implement a stormwater utility, so that we could have a regular recurring source of funding for these culvert projects.
So, yeah, this is the first time I'm hearing about this one, and.
Because you don't live there.
Okay.
I feel like Mary's mentioned it at every select
Have
board
you-
meeting.
Have you driven over the steel plate lately?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
but we had that other culvert failure up at Monument
That's
Street.
right.
That's right.
So I'm wondering, is there any list that is compiled of culverts and, because these two were surprises, or how did this happen?
So we do have a recent inventory.
Okay,
An inventory that was recently completed of all of the stormwater infrastructure, and we do have, or we're putting together a plan to make sure that we're maintaining, a capital plan for
Right.
stormwater.
right, because surprises
Infrastructure.
are expensive and hard to plan for, so that would be great.
Yeah.
And then the other one, the 450,000 for the intersection.
Yep, so this intersection, we've put funding the last two, well, the current fiscal '25 and '24, funding in the capital improvement plan for design and construction of this intersection. It is not directly related to the Novo 40B project, but obviously having additional traffic highlights the need for this intersection improvements. The Novo project is contributing $100,000 to the intersection improvements.
Okay.
And this is the remaining amount, I believe it's $450,000, the remaining amount needed to complete the project as estimated, design and
Great.
construction.
And culvert failures are a little like water main failures. We know they happen.
That's
We never know where they're going to happen, and they're
Yeah,
related to
exactly.
age
Right.
because they're underground,
That's right.
almost by definition, so they're very hard to identify in advance.
Are there any
I
other
did have
things that-
one question about the Baker Avenue one, though. Is there any way in which the MBTA is close enough to that to have any? I know it's near the railroad right-of-way,
It's not really.
not that close.
Funding, what we,
Yeah, or I mean, we don't think that the train line has anything to do with
No.
the failure of the culvert.
You mean impacting the backup of cars?
Yeah, or just potentially that's, I'm thinking about whether or not the fact that it's near a train line has had any, premature failure of the culvert related to.
Oh, the culvert.
the-
I'm sorry.
yeah.
I was thinking you were talking about the intersection.
No, I'm talking about the culvert.
No.
Yeah, okay.
I haven't heard anything like that.
Okay, all right, just,
Anything else on this potential list that people
Well-
want to highlight as something that you
yes.
find? Go ahead.
I just had one comment. Today's MBTA Advisory Board meeting, there's some discussion, and obviously and this is almost part of my liaison report, we know that the governor signed the budget. We know that allocated $475,000 towards Concord planning activities, but we also understand that those monies may be fairly closely tied to specifically the MCI state-owned property. And recognizing that there's considerable sort of adjacent impacts, the Junction Village property, the traffic flow, the studies, there's some discussion about West Concord master planning. I would like to at least hold open the door for the possibility that we may need to come up with an allocation out of this that would support the town's planning and visioning, to be done by the advisory board as a way of trying to integrate a complete townwide plan for MCI. So I noticed that there's some allocation in here already for Route 2 corridor study, which I think is important. That $50,000, I'm not sure how far that would go in terms of what I'm thinking about in traffic circulation, but I'd like to at least consider the possibility that we may want to dig a little deeper for that in maybe just pulling in from 26 into 25 so that we can really have a robust program for planning around MCI
I
Concord.
like that idea.
I know the West Concord group really wanted to do more study, and
Yeah.
there weren't funds, and we weren't sure about the MCI 475.
Right.
The other thing is the Route 2 corridor study, if I read it, is really just looking into the existing report that was already
Yes.
looking at traffic. So, and to the degree that traffic, I don't know what's happening with the Transportation
Well,
Committee
yeah,
on
I'm
that
going to
study.
go over that in
but-
my liaison report.
Yeah, okay, so I don't know how that plays into the planning in West Concord also, so.
Yeah, it's a good question, right, and,
Yeah.
right. But getting back to what Mark said, I agree in theory, but I don't want to send a signal to the state that, I mean, I like the idea that they're going to fund it.
Yeah.
I don't want them to think that we have lots and lots of money to fund it and they don't have to pay, so.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
delicate.
my first choice is to use the funding that's been provided.
Right.
But if we find out that that funding has too many restrictions,
Right,
I want to be able to augment it with, so that we do the right project and the right planning rather than.
Right, so I'm
then-
just wondering if we can label it somehow on the ARPA plan, so it's not like a red flag for the negotiations.
Well, there isn't any negotiation. It's $475,000 was put in the budget, and the budget's been signed, and therefore it also, one of the other issues with it, though, is it's our understanding that those monies may need to be expended by June 30th. So we might want to do something that,
Okay,
takes longer, and therefore might need some money in fiscal '25, which,
right. So there's a lot of maybes.
yeah.
And so what I'm wondering, and maybe we could have a line item that includes that and some other things, like the Route 2 corridor, some
Right.
other maybes.
Yeah.
Put them all in one line item, and so that it's not, because we don't know exactly
Right.
what we're going to do anyway yet.
Okay.
Okay, what about
Yeah,
Cameron?
that's my input.
Two other quick, so one thing is, I do think it would be great to see what we've actually spent off this list versus
Yeah.
just what's listed. And then a couple of the smaller ones, like, I'm okay that they're just sort of there, but I do think we shouldn't give people just blank checks. So like 75,000 advancing DEI initiatives, 40,000 additional data gathering, 25,000, org structure. Like, I don't know if we're just giving them like, oh, hey, here's a blank check. I mean, I'm not sure the process there of just like, what are those projects actually? So I'm okay if that's just a placeholder and someone's gonna come back and say, hey, here's what I really wanna spend the money on. But there should be some mechanism for reviewing, I don't know if it has to be to us and the select board, but somebody had sort of like, how do we,
Yep,
review and approve those?
good point.
So Terry, what do you need from us? Are we trying to define how much, or are we just giving you
Maybe
some
we send
preference?
them to you.
Yeah,
Can we-
so, I wanted to compile the list of all of the requests that I've received, again, informally, because we've not opened up, we've not made any announcement, but, I can't go to more than a couple of meetings before somebody's asking, do you have any ARPA money? So, here's what we have. I would like to receive some feedback. I meet with all of you on a regular basis, so this will be one of the things that I ask you about. And probably for the first meeting in September, if we can fit that on the calendar, if we could schedule an item where we talk about this and come to an agreement
Great,
on,
September 9th.
on what
Great.
what we'd like to see, then that would be sufficient.
Great. Everybody okay with that plan?
That's great.
That's the
That's good.
plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie, for getting us started on that. The next item on the agenda is the chair's report. I want to give an update on the legislation. The Municipal Affordable Act, which would have enabled us to collect local meals and hotel taxes, or raise the taxes and also raise excise tax, did not get any action at the legislature. The next opportunity for that would be January 6th. It might be resurrected on January 6th, but that would miss the deadline for the FY25 town meeting. So that source of revenue that I thought we would at least consider is off the table for now. As Mark mentioned, the budget was approved. The clock is starting to tick on DCAM having their first forum. We have tentatively scheduled that for September 12th. And that will be the first forum with DCAM, with the MCI Advisory Board, to begin to both educate the community and get input. The other thing in the legislature, which I'm sorry about this, but this is going to be vague because I don't know where it stands. We had $325,000 in grants for the 250th celebration. Apparently, that wasn't in the original budget. It's in a supplemental budget, and I will get an update as far as where that is the next time we meet. I wanted to mention the Chair's Breakfast. We have a Chair's Breakfast every month. I think it's the third Wednesday. Is that right? The third Wednesday. And I wanted to remind people it's a great opportunity to learn what's happening in the community, to break down stovepipes, to understand what's happening outside your committee and how the work of other committees impact yours. So I want to remind this too. I know we have a lot of new chairs, so I'm putting that out there. The other reminder is that we're having a joint meeting on August 19th of the School Committee, the Finance Committee, and the Select Board. At that time, we will review capital and hopefully get some agreement on the definitions of capital and how they're treated in the budgeting process. We will also begin to discuss the disposition of the Peabody land.
Oh, great,
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
great.
Yeah, that will be good. I want to remind people also that we've scheduled a forum on September 30th to talk about the residential tax exemption. That will be it'll be an opportunity for the assessors to present the data that they've been able to observe in the first year that this has been implemented, give some snapshots of how it's affected homes of different values, and listen to feedback. Following that, yeah,
So that's not a regular selectmen's meeting, that's a special meeting?
it's a special meeting.
Okay.
Yep, we have a lot of special meetings
All
coming
right.
up. And also on that day, we'll be looking at the capital plans, the first look at capital plans from both the town and the schools. So that will basically be a scrubbing of what we were given in the ARPA funding,
What was the date on that?
September 30th.
September 3rd.
The SHI is currently at 12.81%, which is comfortably over 10%. That does not include the Thoreau residences. And this morning at our MCI Advisory Board meeting, Elizabeth Hughes, our town planner, believes that even after the 2030 census, we will be comfortably above the 10% SHI. So that's good news. I'm looking. Okay, I wanted to address something that came up at the last Select Board meeting where one of the public comments suggested that the Select Board, because several of the Select Board members benefited from the residential tax exemption, that there was a potential conflict of interest in the Select Board voting for the residential tax exemption. And I have 2 points I'd like to make. One is that the Select Board is statutorily required to vote on tax rates. So it is their obligation, it's their responsibility to do so, and that's what we do. The second thing, though, I'm going to address is the conflict of interest. And the Select Board makes decisions all the time about spending that's going to benefit some people and not benefit others. The school committee makes decisions all the time about spending that's going to impact certain demographics and not others. The middle school building committee makes decisions all the time that's going to impact certain constituents in town and not others. So it would be unrealistic to think that every time a decision that's in front of us impacted us personally, that we recused ourselves is simply not realistic. So for example, we just looked at ARPA funds. In part of those ARPA funds, I think was some money for some resurfacing of Rideout. If one of us is a pickleball advocate, should we recuse ourselves from that because we play pickleball? Obviously, that doesn't make sense. So there is a guideline that is put together by the state, and I'm going to read that to you. We actually checked with our our legal counsel to find out exactly when recusal is appropriate and when it isn't. And I'll read to you what he said. The State Ethics Commission, through General Law, Chapter 268A, has determined that a municipal official may act on an issue that affects a personal financial interest so long as that interest is shared by more than 10% of the town's population. And now that we're getting specific to the residential tax exemption, because well over 10% of Concord homes are owner-occupied, Select Board members do not need to abstain from the residential tax exemption vote. So I hope that's clear to people that if it's going to benefit more than 10% of the people, there's no need for any board or member to recuse themselves from the vote. That's all I have. Select Board liaison reports. I'd like to start with you, Wendy, okay?
Oh, all right, okay. Only been 2 meetings, so I'll start with the Zoning Board of Appeals. There was a high-level design overview provided on that 40B Thoreau residence proposal.
Yeah.
It's a high-level overview because they have made some good efforts to address town citizen concerns. They've made some proposed changes. They've reduced the number of buildings from 3 to 2, although the height of the buildings will be a little bit higher. They've increased the number of units from 216 to 237. But they've also moved the buildings further away from the abutters, and they've also proposed a shared driveway with the Thoreau Club.
Great.
Which, is going to eliminate a lot of the concerns around the tree removals and soil disruption, et cetera. So I think they've made a lot of good progress. During the hearing, there was a hearing, also the committee reviewed a waiver request from the Thoreau Club, which is actually the driveway owner, and a waiver was required because they want to provide access to the new multifamily facility, which the Thoreau Club is not zoned for, so they needed a waiver. So the proposal was favorably viewed by members of the board. They did not take a vote on it. They'll be doing that this week on the waiver. Presuming that that's positive, the next step will be a more comprehensive review with a new detailed design with elevations, et cetera, and that's not scheduled until September 26th. So
Okay.
they've made a lot of changes and a lot of positive progress for everyone concerned there.
Let me interrupt you for a second,
Sure.
Wendy. Did they talk about fossil-free?
They did not talk about that in the meeting. I suspect that will be a hot topic.
Okay.
That they will address on the 26th. I can see if I can get more information, but they didn't come with a detailed design. It was really trying to get some feedback. The driveway change was a big component to their proposal.
Great.
So-
Good,
so
thank you.
More to follow, and yeah. The other update I have is from the Climate Action Committee, which actually met during our Select Board meeting, but they've started to review the Climate Action Plan itself, and they started with the built environment section of the report. There's a lot of things that have been achieved as part of the plan, but they've also created a subcommittee to start looking at networked geothermal projects. So if you hear a new subcommittee was formed, what their idea is that they want to evaluate the feasibility, evaluate the business model for geothermal. So, and I've actually tried to connect them with Cameron, who has some expertise in this area. So, again, they're just trying to see what the business model might be and if it's favorable to Concord. It's very complex, but they're
It's
They're
yeah,
eager.
I mean, I won't bore
Yeah.
people with the details,
complex,
but it's definitely a thing that has its place.
Yeah.
It can get very expensive, so
Yes,
cost
that
is
was-
a big sort of concern.
Is this for municipal buildings or commercial buildings in town?
So if they're looking for a
So
project, first they want to just
that
understand the
doesn't-
business
yeah.
model.
Could be
It's
either,
not
but-
a specific project.
Okay,
They want to
okay,
understand the
good,
model.
yeah.
There's been a couple.
We've done some pilots at National
Yeah.
Grid
Yep.
already, like in Lowell. And I
Yeah.
think we're getting one going now in Boston,
Right.
and so there's some
Yes.
learnings there. that I
Okay,
think could help
okay.
us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
What's
the
it
only
called
other-
again? What's it called again?
It's called networked geothermal.
Networked
It's really
geo-
a very large sort of infrastructure, sort of, and the idea with these other, well, I won't go into it.
Okay, thank you.
Because they're source heat pumps, these are ground source.
Yeah, they just in the
It's running
ground, yeah.
stuff through the ground, but.
Yeah.
so the
Isn't
ground
that
is-
what Novo's doing? I thought that's what,
Yeah, but
that's what Novo was doing.
I don't know the details on it.
Okay.
It may be, but
Pretty
this
sure.
is a larger scale project.
Okay, okay.
And the only other update from the Climate Action Plan, the next EV event is scheduled for September 14th. I don't know the location, but, so they're continuing to work on
Oh,
it.
great. At the high school? Will it be at the high school?
There was some discussion about Crosby's, but it's not finalized, so September
Okay, great.
14th
Those
will
are
be the
fun.
event. And they'll do the housing, the sort of heat pump programs as well, but they haven't finalized that program yet.
Good.
So,
Great.
that's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, and we've been doing our flag policy, but we'll get to
We'll
that.
get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that
Yeah,
later.
We definitely will get to that.
Right. Okay, so I wasn't here last time, so a few items. The 250th, we've received a grant for $27,000 for age-friendly benches that are going to be installed for the 250 celebration from the Road Depot to Concord Center to the North Bridge. And also, Kerry mentioned that a great event coming up this Sunday night. There's free museum admission, great family event, August 11th at 5:30. And the corporation is starting to give out or receive applications for events and programming for the 250th, so that's exciting. On the 2229 Main Street Task Force, one member has to step down due to health concerns, so we have nominated tonight in our consent calendar Pam Rockwell, who's very familiar, very up to speed, and has been the liaison from the Oversight Committee. PEG access, we're making some good progress, but we are not going to make it. The deadline is August, I forgot the date, so we're looking at another extension, and hopefully this is going to be the last one, but this is kind of a formality that the Select Board will have to vote again, probably at our next meeting.
Okay.
The HATS Committee, Hanscom Area Town Select Boards, was looking at the ESPR, which is the environmental review for Hanscom. It's a 5-year plan, and they've come up with, they're going to send a joint statement from HATS as a comment letter, and also they're encouraging each select board to send a letter. So I've been working with Shannon on that, and we'll be back to you on that. The deadline is September or something. And finally, a lot of information from the Transportation Committee. They've met 3 times in the past month. They had a special meeting to send in a comment letter to DOT on the Route 2 corridor.
That was
you've
great.
seen, a really excellent
That was
letter.
an excellent letter.
Addressing citizen concerns, especially crossing from Concord Center to West Concord, getting across Route 2. Related to something else we talked about today, the MBTA. They are talking about a $700 million operating deficit, and they're going to maybe be making austerity cuts, including possible elimination of weekend service on the commuter rail. So hopefully we won't hear more about that, but we'll see. About that bike fatality, the Transportation Committee talked about that for a while, and they don't feel like beefing up signage is going to be enough. The drivers are distracted. They're going to be recommending rumble strips or flashing lights, or, I mean, obviously there's some places that we wish we had a larger right-of-way and we could make a much better intersection, but we can't, so what can we do? So we'll be hearing more about that. And finally, they talked about bicycle parking. We need a lot more in town, and we need it to be at the right locations and a usable design. They showed some examples of designs that are being used and some that are just sitting there because people don't know they're there or the design doesn't work. So they're working with Elizabeth Hughes on that. That's it.
I got a question about the Transportation Advisory Committee. It seems like they spend energy on bicycling. Do they talk at all about public transportation within Concord?
So public transportation is one of the largest priorities of the transportation study that the consultant is working on
Okay.
now. And those priorities were recently identified by TAC, and one of the very highest was public transportation within Concord. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm going to talk with Carrie at your invitation that you said earlier that that 75,000 that we have left, we may need more. money on the transportation consultants, so we could talk about that.
When, Terry, is the current report due? Because there's a study that's in progress, right? So what is the timeline for that?
Well, it got extended by a lot. We don't have a transportation planner, and also the whole scope of the study got changed. So we finally got the scope straightened out and sent into the consultant last week. So it's really hasn't taken off yet, but now it will. It was supposed to be finished already, but we do want it to be finished in time for the budget cycle and to tie in with the road work and the streetscape infrastructure repairs that we're going to recommend in the capital plan at this town meeting.
Good.
So we need to get,
moving.
yeah, really, because capital planning's starting, right?
I know, it's really delayed, yeah.
I think having the tax support for some of the road repairs and the spending would be very helpful.
Yes,
Okay, thank you. You done?
yep.
Great, thank you, Mark.
Okay, I'll just cover two things quickly. I mentioned several things about the MTI Advisory Board. So they have 45 days. Also on the clock there is the expectation that within 30 days they will be, the state will be making an offer to the town to take the wastewater treatment facility, and to which we will have 180 days to respond. However, that response is mostly in the form of some kind of memo of understanding, so we don't have to actually buy it within that time frame. So there's ongoing engineering studies to replace that. And on the Warner's Pond Task Force, it's actually going a month between full task force meetings, but there's a lot going on that has broken up into 3 subgroups that are each, as I mentioned at the last meeting, looking at one of the 3 major options, which are sort of a status quo, manage the pond option, a dredging option, and a dam removal option, and trying to develop the ideas behind each of those to a level where we can sort of evaluate them against each other. So since we're running a little behind, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Cameron?
Yeah, no big news to report, so I'll keep it brief. Really, I'm just plugged in. Now I feel like I'm kind of finally hitting stride with all the different committees and stuff. So the town meeting committee, got myself plugged into that one.
Good.
Meeting with
Thank
Eric
you.
this week to sort of get
Good.
up to speed more on more of those details. You know, similarly, just meet Public Works, Historic Committee, Historic District Commission, Light Board, so all, no big news to report.
Okay.
And then plugging in with, as Wendy mentioned, with some folks on the geothermal piece.
Great,
All good?
thank you. Thank you. Okay. I'm looking now at the next agenda item, which is to discuss the dog hearing. Before we get into this agenda item, and I think we have people here. Greg Corbo?
Yes.
Thank you. Before we get into this item, I just need to let people know that I'm going to recuse myself from the decision whether we have a hearing or not, and I will recuse myself from the hearing if we so decide, because I live in Concord Green, and this particular hearing is about 2 residents that live in Concord Green. I don't know them personally, but I know enough about Concord Green where I feel like I wouldn't be impartial. So I will recuse myself. But the first part of this discussion is just to kind of educate us as to what are our options here. And then when you get into making decisions, give me so I know to leave. Okay? Okay?
So if I could just do a minute
Please.
of intro.
Please.
We do have Attorney Greg Corbo here with us this evening from KP Law. The reason that I asked Attorney Corbo to attend the meeting is because we do not have dog hearings or requests for dog hearings on a regular basis. The last one that I can remember, I believe, was in 2017 or 2018. So this is something that fortunately happens on a very infrequent basis, but obviously it's something that is generally viewed as a very difficult situation. There is governing state law, policy, and practice around this particular issue. and not something that a lot of attorneys have a whole lot of experience in, but fortunately Attorney Corbo does. I did also want to mention that our animal control officer, Jennifer Condon, is here in the audience.
Hi.
This is a request for a hearing. It's not a hearing, but I did ask the ACO to come in the event that you had any particular questions of her. So I will turn it over to Attorney Corbo.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, good evening. My name is Greg Corbo from KP Law. That was a great introduction, and just a little bit more about myself. I've been with KP Law, formerly Coleman and Page, for approximately 25 years now, and I've been handling dog matters probably for the entirety of that time.
Good for you.
Lucky you.
Yes. How does one end up in that situation? Well, when you're young and just out of law school, you'll do just about anything that's asked of you, especially if it involves going to court. And then, lo and behold, once people realize that you're willing and able to do these things, you just never get out from under it. But I am happy to help, and I do have a great deal of experience, and in that experience, I can tell you that this situation or these types of complaints are probably the most difficult thing that you'll face as a member of the select board. Obviously, you're dealing with a lot of very important topics, with the finances of the town and capital projects and things like that. But something like this tends to garner significant emotion, both from the individual who is bringing the complaint as well as the owner of the dog that is involved in the complaint. And, neighbors might be involved as well. So it is a difficult situation. I don't envy the position that you're in, but hopefully I can help you, shed a little bit of light on the process and come up with a plan for going forward with this particular complaint. So just to begin with, the process for nuisance or dangerous dog complaints is set forth in Chapter 140 of the general laws between sections 136A and 174E. And of most relevance to you is section 157, which allows a town resident or any person to bring a complaint to the select board alleging that a dog owned or kept within your jurisdiction is a nuisance or dangerous dog, as those terms are defined in the statute. Now, once you have such a complaint in front of you, the first thing that you will need to address is whether to convene a public hearing. And what the statute says is that if you are to make a decision on a complaint, you must convene a public hearing, and that public hearing must include an examination of the complainant under oath. That public hearing will involve notice to the dog owner. It does not have a statutory newspaper publication requirement, but depending on the situation, you might wish to have some type of broader public notice. But once you decide to have a hearing, you'll provide specific notice to the owner of the dog, indicating the date, time, and location of the hearing, and what the subject matter of the complaint is, and the potential consequences that might follow from a finding of the board. During that hearing, you will then hear evidence from a number of sources, as I said before, primarily examining the complainant under oath, but you might also hear from your animal control officer, from members of your police department, and you'll also hear from the owner of the dog, people who are familiar with the dog, either relatives or neighbors, and likewise other people who may have had problems with this dog. And then at the end of that testimony, you will then essentially have two questions you'll have to answer. First, whether the evidence supports a finding that the dog is a nuisance or dangerous dog. And then if the answer to that question is yes, what, if any, remedy would you seek to impose? If you find that the dog is a nuisance dog, the statute is broad and says that you can issue any remedy necessary to abate the nuisance. If you find that it's a dangerous dog, there are a number of remedies that are set forth in the statute, the most severe of which is that the dog be humanely euthanized. Less severe are various forms of restraint, including that the dog be kept in a kennel of certain specifications, that it be muzzled and or leashed when it's outside of its property, that the owner obtain a certain level of insurance, and other things of that nature. Once that finding is made, the owner of the dog has an opportunity to appeal that finding to the local district court, and the appeal is first heard by a clerk magistrate of the court who has very limited authority and can only reverse the decision of the select board if they find that the decision was made without proper cause or in bad faith. If the magistrate affirms the decision, then the owner has a second opportunity to appeal to a justice of the district court. And at that point, the justice conducts what they call a de novo hearing, which means that the judge is not required to give any deference to whatever findings you may have made in your hearing. The judge decides the matter fresh, as if nothing happened here, and renders their own decision. So you'll notice that the one thing I haven't said so far is, well, what constitutes a nuisance or a dangerous dog? And not too long ago, the legislature did a substantial overhaul of this statute, and one of the things that they did was create new definitions of these terms, nuisance dog and dangerous dog. And while the intent may have been to clarify things, as you will hear in a moment, these definitions are clear as mud. So I will read them out, and then we can go maybe through them a little bit more slowly or practically. So
Yeah, I think we can focus on the nuisance from the,
Yeah, just.
Sure.
we gotta get into all the dangerous stuff. 'Cause
Yeah.
It sounds like it's a nuisance.
Okay, so the definition of nuisance dog is one that by excessive barking or other disturbance is a source of annoyance to a sick person residing in the vicinity, or by excessive barking causing damage or other interference, a reasonable person would find such behavior disruptive to one's quiet and peaceful enjoyment, or 3, has threatened or attacked livestock, a domestic animal, or a person, but such threat or attack was not grossly disproportionate reaction under all the circumstances. So we can put that third category to the side for a moment. Although that definition of nuisance dog does include an attack, generally speaking, a nuisance level attack would be something that is less severe than a dangerous level attack, or might be justifiable or mitigated in some way.
Do you have any more guidance about what you mean by a sick person?
I had the same question.
So yes, that's something that is not defined in the statute. And so there can be some discretion on the part of the board, to decide, well, under the facts and circumstances that are in that particular complaint, and given the intent of the statute, right, which is to prevent someone who might have certain sensitivities from being disturbed by a dog, where a person who doesn't have those sensitivities may not be as bothered. And so, again, when we get into I think the facts of this particular complaint, that might become a little bit more clear as to what is meant by a sick person in this context.
Okay.
But, I think the overall, point of this provision of the statute is that, you have a dog that is not being kept in a way that is not disturbing others around them. And so that could either be a sick person who resides in their vicinity, or, it could be such that it's a person who's not sick, but that the behavior is so extreme that any reasonable person would be disturbed by the type of behavior that is going on.
Okay,
Okay?
okay, thank you. I'd like to open it up for questions.
Yeah, I'm back on the criteria for deciding whether to have a hearing or
Right,
not have a
exactly.
hearing.
Right.
And I'm not sure that I heard you cover those, and if you did, I apologize.
Yes, no, that's okay. So, under the statute, any person can make a complaint to the select board, and upon receipt of that complaint, the select board can decide to hold a hearing. It can be a routine matter, such as every time we receive a complaint, we're going to hold a hearing. But as with most enforcement matters, you have a level of discretion to decide whether or not you're going to use your resources on a particular matter. These hearings, can last as long as 2 hours. And, you've many other things that you need to be dealing with. And you may look at a complaint and on its face say, well, there's nothing here that rises to the level of a nuisance or a dangerous dog. We don't believe that this complaint warrants further discussion by the select board. However, and that's the thing that we're going to do next, is we're going to look at this particular complaint, and you'll decide either that the complaint on its face has enough to justify it going to the next level, which is the holding of a hearing, or that it is deficient because it doesn't meet either of the definitions in the statute, and there would be no purpose in the board holding a hearing. It is a very high-level decision, and if there is any question, then my recommendation would be to hold the hearing, because at this point, the owner of the dog does not have an opportunity to be heard. They don't have due process, and so I wouldn't want anything to occur that is prejudicial to that process. So we're going to look at the face of the complaint and, do the allegations in this complaint fit within the four corners of this nuisance dog definition. And
Let me interrupt you for a second. Can you require the parties to seek mediation before you decide whether to have a hearing or not?
well, the statute is mandatory in that it allows any person to make a complaint to the select board. However, under your town bylaws, there is an opportunity for the animal control officer to sort of act like that mediator. The animal control officer can issue an interim order that lasts for a period of 14 days. And during that period of time, the owner of the dog, if they're not satisfied with the actions of the animal control officer, can then move it forward to a hearing themselves, sort of
Okay.
like an appeal.
Okay. The answer is
but-
no.
But that being said,
Yeah.
Okay.
there would be nothing to prevent, right, before sitting down and having a hearing, asking the parties to get together and work things out, maybe sit down with one of you.
So I have a
or-
question. You talked about the appeal process if we had a hearing. But if we didn't have a hearing, what would happen? What are the next rights of the complainant and the owner?
So if you decide not to have a hearing, then there is no finding of nuisance, and there's nothing to be appealed at that point.
Right?
If the individual who brought the complaint, feels that they are still aggrieved by the behavior of the dog, they have the option of, maybe supplementing their complaint with additional information that wasn't available before and asking you to reconsider your decision. Or they have private rights of action where, any person can bring a claim alleging that another person is causing a nuisance through an unreasonable
Okay.
use of their property. So there are other remedies available if you were to decide not to conduct it.
Outside of the select board,
Correct.
be civil court.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay.
Well, looking at what we have,
Yep, so before we go
I
there,
think-
Madam Chair, do you want to
I do.
recuse
gonna
yourself at
leave.
this point? Okay.
So yeah, so I mean, the thing for me in just looking at it is, it's just super unclear to me. In the sense of, does this happen once a day for
Yeah,
5 seconds? Or is this happening every 20 minutes for 20 minutes and it happens at 3:30 in the morning? I can't tell. So that is, I would have a hard time saying we need to have a hearing based on this.
I mean,
Just because it's not clear to me, It's sort of like if somebody had a recording that said, listen to this 20-minute thing at 4 in the morning every day, I'd be like, wow, that's bad,
and I also,
right? But I don't know that.
and there was some reports in here, and I don't know, I guess what I question was, how much was, all the information that we received, part of our decision today, is that typical? So, I mean, we have a report from the animal control officer who gave us information, is that typical? Would we get that before making this decision? I assume we would, right? So everything we got in purview. So I saw that the animal control officer said this was not a nuisance because it didn't go on for 20 minutes and that it was intermittent. So I just don't know if we can use that information as the basis of our decision.
So I'm wondering, we have the animal control officer here. Can we ask her these questions now in order to decide whether to hold the hearing? Can we ask some of these questions?
So I think we can ask a few clarifying questions, but again, we don't want to
We don't
go
want to
too
have the
far.
hearing
That's-
before the hearing,
that's-
right?
Exactly,
Right.
right. So, but I do think that, if there is ambiguity in the reports of the animal control officer, that is something that she can clarify if she has that information.
Yep.
While she's coming up to the microphone, I can just let you know, we have many of these emails that are very similar. This is not the one and only complaint that we've received. This is just representative of the
From the
many,
complainant?
from the complainant,
Okay.
many emails that we have received.
Okay, and then I guess the other question is, there weren't complaints for anybody else that we are aware of, or? No. Okay.
So Cameron, your question.
Yeah, I mean, I would go specifically, I think, to this part that says animal control has indicated, insufficient duration and frequency of the dog disturbance, intermittent nature of the disturbance. I just don't know if there's any more elaboration we could get on that.
What's happening is the owner of the dog takes the dog outside, and the dog is very happy to go outside. So the dog kind of cries a little, barks a little bit, goes outside, does what it does. She takes it for a walk, she brings it back in, and then maybe 3 or 4 hours later, the dog walker shows up. When the dog walker shows up, the dog does the same thing. The dog's excited. It's a small dog. It's a harmless dog. And it just gets excited to go outside, and this is very upsetting to the complainant.
Gotcha. But as far as we know, it's not a, nighttime thing, or?
No. And this all started in January. The dog's been there for 3 years.
And if I could just ask, what is the setup there, in terms of if this dog were barking in an excessive manner, would other people be hearing it?
Well, the unit has 4 condos. The complainant owns 2 condos, one on top of the other. Across the hall he lives on the 2nd floor. Across the hall is the woman who owns the dog. Her mother lives on the 1st floor underneath her.
It's 2 and 2.
2 and 2, okay.
And
Yes.
who lives on the first floor on the other side?
The dog owner's mother lives on the 1st floor underneath her.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who lives on the 1st floor underneath him. I don't know if it's a rented unit or he just owns it. I really don't know.
And those units are essentially separate from other units, so there's unlikely to be anything other than the 2 parties, the 2 principal parties involved. And you've met this dog and find it to be?
I haven't had hands-on with the dog, but I have spoken to the owner numerous times. I've been by the property. She hasn't been home. I've rang the bell, knocked on doors, I don't hear any dog ever. So,
Right.
I'd like to get back to that question for Attorney Corbo about a definition of a sick person. You spoke of sensitivities that an ordinary person doesn't have. I guess maybe you could elaborate and help us figure this out.
Sure. So in this particular context, right, you have a complaint from an individual who claims that they suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder and that sudden loud noises is a trigger for them. So they're in a situation where they have this, shared living situation, right? And every time they come into their own home, the allegations, and again, right, these are only allegations at this point, but the allegation is that every time they come to their own home, they are, essentially accosted by this very loud, repetitive barking, which is a trigger to their illness, and has an impact on them in, I believe he says in his complaint that, it makes him less willing to go out because it may trigger, this response. So, you could find that, again, we'd have to have a hearing and sort through all of this, but if these facts could be proven true, that would likely indicate a source of annoyance to a sick person.
How would you prove it? It sounds like it's he said, she said, and it may not be provable,
And that's what's difficult about this situation is that, we don't know what the relationship is between these two people. I can surmise that it's not good. And right, you're going to have testimony from him that says that every time you drop a pin, the dog goes crazy. And then you'll have testimony from the owner likely who will say, the dog's quiet as a mouse, it hardly ever barks. And it's going to be up to you then to sort of assess, right, the credibility of those two individuals. And, the question would then become of the owner, sort of what are you doing to help mitigate this situation? What type of training has the dog been through? Is there anything that can be done to prevent this from continuing to happen? To try to come to some sort of reasonable compromise so that, this individual can own their dog, but yet at the same time their neighbor can come in and out. So, those are sort of the types of things that you would be looking for.
Can we ask him to sit down and try to work it out? Can we figure out a way to work it out? I mean, there's stuff that's in here that talks about like, I'm happy to sit down, but for some reason people won't meet. And I don't know, again.
And there was discussions with Concord Green Management too, right? Were you involved in those?
yes, I was.
But there wasn't any action taken. They just refused to have a meeting. Is that?
They refused to have a meeting, correct, because of history, back history with the gentleman.
Because of history.
I tried.
Yeah, oh, I know.
I tried. I didn't
Yeah,
want to have to
yeah.
be this way. but
Yeah,
Nobody wants to cooperate.
and that's telling too.
So, it's not a bad idea, right, to try to, reach some sort of compromise and maybe, sort of being under the threat of if you two can't work this out, the next stage is a public hearing. Maybe that would encourage them to try to come up with some sort of workable solution, if there is one to be had. And again, right, all we have is one side of this story. We don't know yet what the other side of the story is. But, certainly, if you asked, I suppose that would be through you, you know, if the parties would be willing to sit down and, you know, try to come up with a solution, and before you make a decision, that's, I think, something that is within your authority to do. There's nothing in the statute that says that you have to hold this hearing within a certain amount of time after receiving a complaint.
So,
I'd prefer to ask them to say, before, I'm not ready to say, let's have a hearing. I mean, I don't think there's enough facts here that would sort of justify that. I'd
Would-
prefer trying to tell them to go try to work it out.
and if we were to suggest that, is there anything that would there be anything problematic about a member of the select board or members of the select board actually interviewing these people ahead of or outside of a hearing, or would that be inappropriate to do?
I think that would be problematic because, you know, if this is going to come to you for a
yeah.
hearing, you're going to be the fact finder and the decision maker, and you don't want to be influenced by things that you're hearing outside of the public hearing context.
Okay, so if we wanted to suggest some kind of mediator or negotiator, we would probably need to identify that person to sort of act on our behalf as suggestive of, you know, let's work it out.
That's right, and so again, that
That's-
can be the animal control officer,
Yeah.
that can be the town
Who's
manager.
already made efforts, as we understand, to do that. Okay. In,
I was going to say, in your experience, do you think, as you suggested, just suggesting that we might have a public hearing, does that often elicit good reaction? Is it successful?
Honestly, no.
no,
I mean, you know, in my experience,
Yeah.
right, by the time it gets here,
Yeah.
it's usually because all other efforts have
Have been
failed.
exhausted.
But again, you know, I mean, there's no time constraint hanging over your heads. So, you know, there's nothing to lose by trying.
Yeah.
What I might suggest is that where the animal control officer has already spoken with these people, maybe she's not the best, no offense, right? But,
Right, no,
No offense taken at all, at all.
you know, and maybe, you know, if you want to have like someone else in the police department or, you know, again, like the.
I know Lieutenant
Sorry.
or Captain Goldman has been involved with this. So he's had conversation with both parties as well.
Do you think he'd be willing to try to get them together?
I could not answer that for him. That would be a question for him.
Carrie, do you think that we have someone in the police department or any department who you might, you don't have to say who they are, but do you,
Sure. We have people, if the board would like us to try some sort of mediation, we can do that.
okay, I really like this idea because it's compromises are never ideal. Everyone hates them, but they might be the best alternative that we've got here. So,
I think it's worth, I mean, I know from your experience, it doesn't always work, but I think it's worth giving it a shot. I think it's worth communicating back to them. And I would also say that if we're gonna, I mean, I would just, if it's possible, if it doesn't get mediated, to understand the, you know, duration and sort of level of disturbance or, you know, something other than just,
yeah, it'll be on TV, it'll be in the
Yes.
bridge, it'll be a
Get a lot of
big deal, embarrassing, whatever.
So I think it would be helpful if you, I'm not asking you to say you would schedule a hearing, but if you would say you'd like to check in 60 days, 45 days, something like that, I think that would be helpful to bringing the parties to a mediation table.
I think that's good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, 45 days?
45 days, check in, and if they're making progress and they want more time, great, we can extend it.
Yep.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Do we need to take a vote?
I think a motion would be helpful.
Okay, let's see if we can come up with one.
I will make a motion that we ask the parties to engage in some mediation discussions, that we will look for somebody that Kerry will try to appoint from within the town, one of the town departments to help engage in those discussions with the parties, and that we look for a report back in 45 days at the second select board meeting in September, maybe by the last select board
Yep.
meeting in September, as to the status.
Okay.
Yeah. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Very
handing that to
helpful.
you. Very.
Great.
Appreciate your efforts, thanks.
Right. Get Mary?
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ew.
She must do a good job because we only have him every 6 years, right?
We're gonna
Seen him in other
ask
towns, very ugly.
7:30.
for a mediator,
He's a dog as
look for a report in 45 days to see if they're making any progress.
Great. Okay, it's time to have a public hearing for the transfer of the off-premise liquor license. So do I have a motion to open a public hearing?
So moved.
Yes, move to open a public hearing on transfer of liquor license of the Grateful Gourmet doing business as the Cheese Shop to Joshua Jocelyn of Jocelyn Food Cooperative.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Come up.
So they said the second meeting in September. Agenda for status.
Okay, did Andrea have it?
Not sure. Status.
Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
And welcome, welcome very much. We're glad you're here. Welcome to Concord. We have limited amount of time. We've read your slides. We have a lot of questions, I imagine, because the Cheese Shop is something that's a very beloved place in our community. So if you could just ground us a little bit and then open it up for discussion by the board, I would really appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair and the Select Board. My name's Harold Jacoby. I'm an attorney in Lexington, Massachusetts, and for fair disclosure, 50 years ago, I marched in the 200th anniversary of Concord. And Sudbury fielded the most Minutemen, 220.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they had one who fired his musket in the air and was arrested. That was not me. And the second thing is I've lived in Sudbury for 52 years.
Oh.
But I'm proud to represent Joshua Jocelyn, who is the gentleman who is seeking the transfer of the liquor license from the cheese shop. He didn't bring cheese tonight or wine.
No, unfortunately not.
So he can answer most of the questions. for you.
Great, great. Well, thank you and welcome,
Thank you.
really. I'm going to open it up to questions from the board members.
Okay, I have some questions.
Great,
Welcome.
thank you.
So, will there be changes at the store? Will the menu be different?
So, up until this point, I've been working very closely with Melanie at the Board of Health, I've spoken to Paul. The business needs a lot of love in order to be compliant with a lot of code. And so, Melanie and I have a working plan where it'll stay operational as it is now until May 1st, and at May 1st, so after the 250th, so that we're around for that. We'll close and renovate the space. There'll be no changes to the menu. It's just kind of beautifying and modernizing the infrastructure so that the cold cases keep temp. There's hand washing stations, everything now that when the business was first created, it didn't need because it wasn't in code, that it now lacks. I hope that answers your question.
So, you're talking about Board of Health, Melanie?
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
All right, and why is the current owner selling it
I think he just kind of wants to retire.
Retire.
I've known Peter for 15
Yeah.
years. My background is I imported specialty food for 10 years. I sold to him as a vendor.
Mhm.
My wife and I moved up here we live in Sudbury, in 2021. And my old employees called me and said, Peter wants to retire and wants to sell it. And I'm like, I live 15 minutes away. Let me go talk to Peter. We've been trying to work this out for over a year now. So I think he's just,
Okay,
at it. Yeah.
great.
Do you have any questions, Wendy? You
I
okay?
guess, this is the first time I've ever seen the term off-premise liquor license, right? Because you're selling liquor on site.
Mhm.
So first I was
Good
confused
question.
what that was going to do. But in terms of the wine selection, and you said you were going to try to keep everything sort of in keeping with what's there today. Would you expect more changes beyond that after you do your renovation in May?
So the short answer is I want to keep it almost exactly the same, but change. I don't know how familiar you are with the layout, but there's an office area on the top floor.
Oh, okay.
That takes a lot of real estate. I want to move that to the basement so that there's just more space.
Okay.
Expand the kitchen. The business right now floats because of the success of the kitchen, but the kitchen is extremely small and it can't be augmented at all without being out of code. So it has to be rebuilt the second anything's done. So just expand the kitchen so that we can offer a more robust food selection. So yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Yeah, that'll be good.
I don't know if you know, like, what they had been doing in terms of liquor, and if you're thinking that it's gonna be a bigger or smaller part of your mix, or, you know what I mean? Like, is liquor sales gonna be a bigger thing, or a smaller thing, or about the same, or we don't really know? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so it's, as a percentage of sales, much smaller than it should be. And that's comparing to other industry standards. Right now, it's somewhere between 10 and 12% of the total business, which is very small. Just to give you some context, if other competitor stores, let's say, but Cheese Shop in Salem, their total volume is 40% of their gross revenues in alcohol sales, so wine sales.
Yep.
So part of the renovation is just to give the wine a larger footprint, more just for the glass, because I think it beautifies it a bit more. And hopefully it sells more. But really the expectation is for the kitchen and the cheese to really be important.
So
How
it
much
was-
bigger? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, it was unclear to me what the state of the transfer was. Do you actually know when the business will transfer to you?
So the business, the transaction is dependent on the liquor license transferring.
Okay,
So it's kind of cyclical.
Okay.
So what we've done, and this also includes the lease starting date. So
Yes.
we've just put the whole thing to end on October 1st.
okay.
I'm hopeful that we can have the state turn it around a bit
Right.
quicker than the long estimate.
All right, and are you planning any kind of events or around that?
Not
For
on
grand
the
opening?
first part. So once
Okay.
we close, I want to reopen in a half a day, whatever's in compliance
Yeah.
with what Melanie needs. But when we
Okay.
close for renovation, we have a lot of ideas on how to reopen. I think because it's such an institution, my biggest worry during the renovation is that I upset a lot of people with like, hey, it doesn't look exactly the same anymore. So I'm quite sensitive to that. So the fortunate thing is I'll have some time I've already kind of been working there off and on since November to get to know regular customers, get to know the staff, which are all great. But this is a long-winded way of saying we're going to have probably a few days, if not a week, of soft openings where we work with community partners, bring them in and say, hey, we're going to do a lunch and dinner, and we want you guys to be there, and it's 3 days before we opening, just to really kind of re-ingratiate back to the community.
Right. How long do you think the renovation process is likely to take?
My architect said it's going to take between 3 and 6 months.
Okay.
It depends on the scope of the renovation. I have an option to renovate the basement in addition to the first floor, which I don't know that I will do yet. I have to sit down and look at costs and see where priorities are.
What will you do for revenue for those 3 to 6 months?
What will I do for what?
For revenue?
Looking at a couple of options, it'll be during the summer, so we have a few options. One is, my biggest concern here is losing staff, not so much bringing money in, because the staff is great, but they're gonna leave if we don't have a job for them.
Mhm.
So there's farmers markets that we can attend, and I can have a few staff members attend those selling finished goods like grilled cheese sandwiches or things along those lines.
Mhm.
I have, it might be a food truck option, but again, that's a big expense to try and only do for 6 months. So I'm trying to find ways to keep people employed. But we're prepared to. I've also worked with Mimi, who suggested there are some other other businesses that might be struggling, that might have some available space that we
Right.
can sub-rent during that
Great.
time period.
Yeah.
So
Okay, good.
That would
once
be good.
everything kind of coalesces and I have a better idea of exactly the timing, what's available, then I can start to reach out and see, what the options are.
Great. So you are retaining the staff?
Oh, 100%.
Okay,
Yeah, they're all great.
great. And can you give us an idea of like how big the footprint for the wine would expand?
It wouldn't be more than double. So right now, when you walk in, it's on the right-hand side.
Yep,
Right now, I'm still working out with the architect what the options are. Because of the ramp when you walk in,
Yep.
it kind of limits some of where we might put things. But in one of the two designs, the wine goes across both open windows, about 10 feet deep. So that would be approximately double the space, but all pushed up in the front. In another of the designs, it's on the left side of the store. So when you walk in on the left where the
Yep.
grocery is, about the same footprint, but maybe about 4 feet deeper. So I wish I had a more clear answer, but the fact is I haven't worked deep enough with my architect until I know the liquor license transferring and the business is coming over before
Yeah. I guess I'm just concerned, I don't want it to turn into a liquor store that also sells sandwiches in the back.
No,
you
the
know?
expectation is for the kitchen to get the most of the added additional real estate within the store. Because that's the part of the business that drives it all year round and where I think the most potential is in the future. I mean, I'd love for wine to be a bigger part because frankly, it's much lower than it should be.
Yes, you said that.
But that could be for many reasons, not square footage. It could be
Right.
selection, it could be salesmanship. I mean, for many reasons.
That's right.
But from a redesign perspective, the kitchen is the thing that's getting the most space.
Okay. Okay, any other questions here? Any questions online?
And you're primarily focusing on the wine selection, though. Are you anticipating expanding that at all?
When you say,
So
what,
wine, so you're focused on wine
Mhm.
mostly, but would you expand that liquor selection at all, or
I
can
d-
you under the?
to my
license?
understanding, with an off-premise and the type
Yeah.
of license that he currently has that I'm looking to get transferred, I can't expand it
Okay.
past the wine and beer that he currently has.
It's just, okay,
Right.
all right,
Yeah.
that's good
Yep.
to know.
One thing that I'll bring up here, I do not want to complicate this, so that's my caveat. But in the future, if I'm looking at the redesign on the basement floor, what I would love to do is put a private dining space down there to do private events, in which case, I don't know how that works completely yet with serving alcohol. I know I can't do it with the current license. I don't know if a way to do that. Again, not complicating
Okay.
this, and it doesn't need to happen at this point. It's just an option in the redesign, but I wanted to be forthcoming now. If I'm here 9 months from now saying, hey, I have an idea, and you were to say, why didn't you tell us when you sat down with us then? Just say, so that's my point here, is to bring it up to your attention. It's not necessary, but it's something that my architect is looking at now.
So you'd need an on-premise liquor license?
Right.
In some capacity, there
That's
might be.
different.
Where I was going.
It's different, so that's why I don't want to complicate this,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
it's
This is
not
off-premise.
necessary. This
Okay.
is an off-premise, but I wanted to do my due diligence of being upfront about what some of the options my architect is
Okay,
giving to
great.
make sure.
Well, we certainly want you to succeed there, so let's see what, yeah. Okay, do I have any questions in the room? Mary?
There's always been tables, a few tables there to eat in.
Yeah.
Will that be continued?
It depends on what happens in the basement. So the store only has 12 seats allowed, so it depends if those go in the basement for a private dining area or if they stay upstairs. It's too early in the stage, I don't have enough from my architect.
So not necessarily, if it's private dining area, then the eat-in will not be then.
potentially, but again, way too soon for me to know.
Okay. Any other questions on Zoom? No, good. So do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Move to close the public.
Oh, comment, yes,
sure.
please, please.
Hi, I'm Mimi Grady, the Economic Vitality Manager for the town. And I've been meeting with Josh. I think he might have been one of the first business owner or prospective business owners I met. I know, and I think everybody knows on how beloved the cheese shop is. And in my experience, like Josh was exactly the type of person. Like I think Peter really saw himself as a shepherd of the cheese shop. He bought it from somebody else, and part of his process has really been making sure he's passing it on to a really great steward for the next generation. And I think Josh also didn't kind of delve into like, he's somebody that knows cheese. So I think while he's, and I've been impressed by his ability to really understand this as a business and recognizing like for the long term, what happens often is with legacy businesses, they kind of don't have the same kind of rigor in terms of like making it as profitable as it could be. They're not kind of managing it in the same way. And I really see he's kind of bringing this new vigor of like, how can he bring it into the 21st century, not only in terms of code, for health code and the building code, but even just on how the store is managed so that not just for his own livelihood, but for the next generation coming on. And just the testament of how he's been really hands-on and just getting to know the community and working with the businesses. So I think it's going to be in really great hands.
Great, thank you, Mimi.
Mimi Grady, thank you very much. I was going to add that Josh is the family man. His wife is sitting in the back, Sybil Johnson. Pardon me, they have one child now, but they promised me they're thinking about more kids.
He's 10 months, you gotta give us some time.
And the devotion to the wine and cheese shop is evident because Josh started in November, and by the time we close, it could be a full year. So he's getting to know the people of Concord as well as the people who are working there.
If it's not clear, I imported specialty cheese for a decade and specialty grocery. I have spent a career in specialty food and wine, and I definitely have some expertise there.
Great. Stefan, you had a...
Question, do you plan to bring back the Kugel parade?
I do. Yeah. So the reason it's not happening is a health department kind of stipulation and the kind of relationship there. My goal is to bring it on, working with Melanie, making sure that she's comfortable, and having Peter always be kind of the master of ceremonies of that, because I think he rightfully kind of deserves that, and it'd be a nice homage for him to always have. But yeah, that'll be dependent on Melanie and working with her.
Maybe it's at a time of year that is
not December,
conducive to cheese temperature.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing on the transfer of liquor license for Grateful Gourmet.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we ready to vote?
Move to approve the transfer of the off-premises liquor license of the Grateful Gourmet doing business as the Cheese Shop to Joshua Joslin of Joslin Food Cooperative.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Best
Good
of
luck.
luck.
We're looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Congrats.
definitely.
You'll all be invited to the reopening.
Great. We'll be there.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's exciting.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it is. That is great.
It is good. It's very good. Very good. Okay. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the grant of location requests. Do I have a motion to open a public
Move to
hearing?
open the public hearing for the grant of location, Concord Municipal Light Plant and Crown Castle Fiber LLC for the petition at 133 Old Road to 9 Acre Corner.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Who's presenting? Brandy?
Brandy, can you unmute and let's hear you? Try again. Not yet. We may have a sound problem here, so let's just. Where's the remote control for the TV set? You want to try turning up the volume over there?
There you go.
Try again, oh,
We
it's.
don't hear you yet.
Try again.
Yeah,
That was me.
yeah, that's just coming through the owl.
Ask if any of the other Zoom participants can hear her, even if we can't.
Can any Zoom participant hear Brandy? Brandy, say something. Can you hear me?
Carlin, can you hear? Okay, Carlin can hear.
Carlin can hear.
Carlin can hear.
Carlin, you hear the select board?
But
Do
not
you hear
Brandy.
Brandy?
No.
Oh, no. Oh, I thought,
She shows unmuted. Video's on.
we know, Diane.
Maybe just test your microphone, Brandy. Let's see.
We know.
Maybe if we can't let the technical people work this out, we go to the next
Yeah.
thing.
Let's, we're going to go to the, well, no, because the people at home can't hear us.
No,
No,
they can hear us.
They can hear us,
They
they
don't
can't
hear
hear her.
Brandy.
Okay.
Let's see.
I don't know, Diane was saying she,
Okay, yeah.
well, Pamela looks like she can't hear us.
Yeah, they can't hear us right now, we're muted.
Okay.
Once you see that press, they'll be able to.
Yes.
Okay, can you hear us?
Pamela, can you hear us? Good. Brandy, we can't hear you. We still can't hear you. No, we can't hear you.
It's interesting.
Does Pamela want to try?
Pamela, say something.
Pamela, say something.
Say something.
Say
That
something.
way we can check it out.
Hello?
Nope.
I'm allowed to
Something
unmute.
as
Okay.
her,
It's her.
probably, yeah, because
Right.
everyone else is fine.
Brandy, do you want to take a moment and just reconnect to the meeting?
We're going to move on to the next agenda item, and if you want to try to reboot your machine and come back, we'll try that. Okay?
Did
Let's-
you open your public hearing?
We did.
We did.
So
Move to
Move to
close.
suspend the public hearing while we work out the technical difficulties.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Okay, let's move on to discuss the town manager's evaluation process. I would like to get some of these things voted tonight. We don't have to. I know we might want to think about things, but I'd like to get some of these things agreed to tonight. I want to start with the schedule that I put together. And first of all, I'd like to ask people on the board, do you think these are the right tasks? And do you think the deadlines are reasonable?
So just to ask the question,
Go
because
ahead.
there's a designee in here who has to
Yes.
consolidate, right?
Yes, yes.
So we would get responses back by the 9th, and then you'd have till the 30th?
No.
No, I got
No.
that.
Maybe you
No.
could walk us through this,
Yeah,
Mary.
just quickly.
Okay, the first thing would be to select a designee to compile. So that would be someone that
Yep.
we could talk about it. Then I hope to do that tonight, so we know who that person's going to be. Then we would adopt the form, which is in your packet, and again, I'm hoping that's tonight. And we would talk about who is going to actually provide input to the evaluation
Right.
and the goal setting. On the 19th, Carrie will come to us with a draft of her goals. So now we're shifting from the evaluation to the goals. We'll have a draft on the 19th. The town manager completes the self-eval and distributes to the select board members on August 9th, right? Each select board member meets with the town manager to discuss their individual evaluation. So between, very quickly, the select board members would have to put together their eval, discuss it with the manager, and then finalize it, right? Between August 9th and August 30th. On August 30th, they send it to the person we designate to compile it. We would work then with the HR director, who is Jessica Porter, who's with us tonight, to develop a presentation of the final evaluation. We would compile the evaluation and present it at the open meeting. and we would then finalize the goals.
I think this looks really good.
Good.
The only question I have, is there anything contractually or?
Yes,
statutory?
we're late.
Yeah.
No, I just, so, is it, for reference, when are
Yep.
we supposed to have it?
July? Was it July?
You know,
Just,
I
I guess the
wasn't,
future.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
We can't turn back the
Yeah,
clock, right?
right.
But-
Yeah, it's,
there was agreement that we were late.
Yeah.
If there is any concern,
Is,
No, no,
Agreed to
I'm
being
more asking,
late.
like,
Oh,
for the future.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
What
is
we
this
should
something we
start,
should be
yeah.
doing in August, or is this something like just, you know,
Should-
normally we're supposed to have it done by a certain date?
it's hard because we have new people on the board, then we develop the select board goals, which inform the,
Yes.
you know what I mean?
No, I
So,
do.
so
Right.
we're late.
so the schedule,
But we
the
have a good
schedule as
reason.
it's defined isn't really practical for the way the cycle actually works.
Yeah.
So my only question is,
Go ahead.
is it reasonable to expect that the self-evaluation would be done by Friday?
yes.
Okay.
And,
And
yeah,
then-
I mean, this is, I think this is. as
We're good?
as- Yeah.
Great.
And then, so just to comment, though, as a new select board member,
Yes.
I mean, I can comment on some, but will former select board members participate in this review?
Well, that's
That's the other
number
agenda
3 on our list, but let's talk about it now.
Yeah.
Okay. In the past, new select board members have not participated in the
Okay.
val, because you weren't here in FY '24.
okay.
And this is an evaluation of FY '24's performance.
right, yeah.
So typically, we would ask former select board members,
Yeah.
and in this case, it would be Linda Escobedo
Yeah,
and Mr.
yeah.
Dane, to give their input.
However, the new select board members do participate in the part about setting goals for the town manager for the upcoming year.
Absolutely right.
Right.
You're absolutely right. That's exactly right. So that's what, so let's talk, is that what we've decided we want to do?
Well, I mean, I guess, from my perspective, you know, when we go through the evaluation form, I mean, I would like to provide input where I have it. I'm not gonna make it up and say, so there may be some things we go, I don't know. But to the extent that I have feedback, I mean, why not provide
I
it?
mean, I'm happy to
Because you
provide it
weren't
as
here
well.
in
Do you
FY
agree?
'24. I guess it's as simple as that.
But you also have May, June, July
Yeah, I mean,
experience, so,
I mean, again,
yeah.
But that's
fiscal year
really,
ends what, at the end of June? Is that right?
well, just because we're doing it now doesn't mean we're evaluating performance in
Yeah.
June and July. We're evaluating performance in FY '24 against FY '24 goals,
Which ends
right?
at the end of June, right?
Right.
Which ends at the end of June, right?
Also, the way it's been done before, the person who's compiling takes like an average, because there's some numbers to it, right?
Yeah, now there is, yes.
So I'm not sure, you know, for the new select board members, whether you'd have, you know, equal weight, and then you don't know some of them, and it makes it really complicated for the
Yeah, that doesn't-
compiler. So what we've done is just asked the previous select board members who were here the whole year to participate in that section of the evaluation. But you guys would participate in the setting of the goals part for the upcoming year.
I think you can, I hope you can do what you're hoping to do by helping set the goals.
So, listen, I don't have a problem with, like, if it's a numerical thing,
Yeah.
right, where people are giving scores.
Right.
I get, like, I don't have a problem saying, hey, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna sit here and give you,
Okay.
carry a number and
Right.
average of the scores. I'm still gonna give my
Perfect.
comments on what you know, hey, I've been working with Carrie now for the
Okay,
last few
that's
months,
good.
I've been doing this, like,
Carrie, does that sound
here's
re-
my feedback, you take it for what it's worth. So I
I see what
get,
you're
like,
saying.
don't average in the numbers,
Yeah,
that
that's
makes total
good.
sense, right? Because it would be unfairly weighting something that I have much less experience in.
Right.
But, you know, hey,
Right.
here's, for what it's worth, here's my feedback.
Right. And there's a structure to it, because every
Yes.
time we
There's
talk with
comments on-
Carrie,
yeah.
we're talking kind of
Yes.
about that.
Yes. And
So
there's-
this is a
right.
structure.
Yes.
Okay, Carrie, are you okay with that?
I am okay with any and all feedback.
There you go.
Okay.
Good answer.
And Wendy, are you
So that's all.
interested
It's
in
just sharing
doing
feedback.
something
Right,
similar?
exactly.
I'm, certainly can provide feedback. If it's 2 more meetings to your list, we can do it on our one-on-ones, right? That's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Schedule
That's fine.
one-on-ones.
Right.
That's fine.
Okay, very good. So we've determined that. We crossed number 3 off the list. As far as selecting a designee, last year it was I think Shannon did it last year, and that feels inappropriate to me. So I've got 2 proposals for you. One would be that I would compile it as the chair, and I can do that. Or we could have Jessica Porter, who's our interim HR director, compile it, and she has experience. Jessica, you want to come and talk to us about the experience you've had doing this?
Hi, good evening. Jessica Porter, Assistant Town Manager and Interim HR Director. So I've participated in the performance evaluations of the Town Administrator and Town Manager, both in Belmont and Andover. While the forms have been different in all 3 places now, if we count in Concord's, the process is pretty much the same. Usually I've gathered the individual evaluations, I've plugged the category ratings into numerical systems and formats, averaged across on each line rating, averaged down the categories, came up with a summary composite numerical evaluation, and then similarly I've also gathered the comments and placed them into one full document. I know that there's been some practice where people will take comments and then perhaps edit them, marry up things that are similar. I've typically done the actual comments verbatim as submitted by the individual board members, just because I feel that that's their rating, that's the public information, and I've always shared that. But obviously that can be up to the board's decision here if you want that to be edited by me or by Chair Hartman, or if you want the full unadulterated truth.
What do people think?
I think you should publish the comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As the
Yeah,
written.
I think so.
Same as our letter. I mean, if somebody
Right.
wrote something that was inappropriate,
Right.
but, you know,
That's right.
but
Yeah.
otherwise you should,
Which has
comments are
never
what they are.
I agree with what you said, Jessica, about putting them in verbatim. I think when you try to compile them, this information gets lost.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's 360 feedback,
Okay.
so it's fine.
Well, 360 feedback would really be asking the senior management team what they thought. We'll do that next year.
Yes.
I think it's a great idea, but I don't want to go too far down the weeds, but I've seen that done as well in past places.
I
not
agree
the
with you.
town
I think it's
manager,
a,
but-
I think it's
a good
a,
idea.
I think it's
Yeah.
good.
We're not prepared for that right now.
No,
I think what we should do is, as we wrap up this cycle, we should, discuss the process going forward for next year
great.
so that we have
That's a great idea.
have a
Yep.
Agreed.
better level set and maybe even put a calendar in place so that we remind ourselves of when we need to do things.
The only other comment I just want to share is I'm happy to do any and all of this piece. The only thing is with regard to the final presentation and whatnot, I am on vacation from the 5th to the 12th of September, so I know we're already behind, but it would either be doing it sooner or just pushing it by 1 week so that I could provide that.
We can't do it sooner because we have a 3-week break between August 19th and September 9th. So sooner is not possible.
Okay.
So I guess later is the next option. So-
Manager.
Well, but I mean, if you put it together, I mean,
The second meeting in September is probably as good as the first for that.
What is that date? I should be able to do this in my head.
It's like the 23rd.
Thank you.
23rd.
That's
It
right.
is the 23rd.
Oh, you're going to be away.
Well,
Where you
Wait, but you know what?
Where are you
Let's just
going?
I'm going to Paris.
Okay, so, but you're going to get it to us before you presented it. So what we have here is you're presenting it on the 23rd, right? But you're going to get it to us before that.
Well, typically, based on my prior communities, the
Yep.
advice of legal has been that I can't even give you the whole composite document until that night of the meeting
that's
because it's
right.
a violation of.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay, so let's shoot for September 23rd.
okay.
Okay, great. Okay, so do I have an agreement that we designate Jessica Porter the assistant town manager as the
Yes.
individual? Great,
Yes.
great, thank
Okay.
you. And how about,
Move to approve the annual town manager evaluation process as outlined in this meeting.
well, no, we haven't gone over the
Separate.
form.
We didn't do that yet?
We didn't go over the form. Adopt the form
I
too.
mean,
Right, but we can
Any comments, questions?
vote Jessica, or you.
We can vote, well, you were saying
Yeah,
the
well,
whole
I
thing.
was doing the schedule and the, and.
He was doing everything.
Okay,
Give us a minute, and then we'll come back to
okay, I
that.
thought we already discussed the form in the sense
did.
of this
Any
numerical
comments?
evaluations with comments.
Great.
Looked like last year's.
Yeah,
And
and everything in it.
It's maps right to the goals, so there
Right.
shouldn't be any controversy here. Great,
Yeah.
very good, go ahead. Mark.
Okay, sorry. Move to approve the annual town evaluation process and designate Jessica Porter as the compiler of the evaluation.
Yes, but only, are we changing September 9th to?
Yeah.
23rd.
September 23rd, right.
Yes.
Are we still going to finalize the goals on September 9th, I think?
So can I ask a question? How do the goals feed into the 24 evaluation? How do the 25 goals fit into the 24 evaluation?
You don't.
They don't.
They don't, all right,
Yeah.
so they
So we
could
can-
be
we can
separate,
keep that on
right?
We could do that,
Absolutely.
Doesn't
yeah.
have to
Do
be,
that on the
yeah.
9th.
We should do that on the
Right.
9th.
Very good, very good.
Is there
So
a
the only
form for
change-
that? Because Cameron and Wendy will be, or is that just sort of?
Well, we have we have last year's.
Yeah, we
And
already,
we're going to get a draft, we're going to get a
Yeah.
draft.
Wait a minute,
August
wait a
19th.
minute. I'm talking
So-
about a form for next year's goals.
Oh, right,
Okay,
and Carrie's
so
giving
last-
us her draft goals on August 19th.
yeah.
So that's the format.
And at the last meeting, we started to look at a
Okay.
preliminary set of goals.
Okay,
Okay?
yep,
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Do I have a second?
second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Very good. Thank
Okay.
you, Jessica.
Okay, let's go back to, Brandy.
Oh, wait, I had it-
Let's try Brandy's audio for, just to,
Can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Ah,
Okay. Now,
Awesome.
just hold for a split second.
Phones are better than computers, I guess.
Hold for a split second, so Diane Proctor has
Oh,
it. Diane, did you have something?
Yeah, did you, Diane,
No.
did you?
Okay, she's gonna-
Yes, I have a very, just to comment on Carrie's terrific work for the town. Is there a formal way to do that, or is this not appropriate? Could you give us some advice? 57 Sudbury Road, Diane Proctor.
wait,
Okay.
what?
So
I'm sorry,
she-
Diane, you
She's
were
asking if
breaking
it's
up.
possible for a citizen to comment on the town manager's performance, and if so, how would we
Oh.
receive that input?
I haven't thought about that.
Let us get back to you.
Yeah.
Maybe on the 23rd, when we present it.
Yeah.
That's what we've
Terrific. I
done in
just,
the past.
I suspect that many of us feel strongly about how wonderful Carrie's been, and it would be, if you could just give us a way of suggesting how we might do that, a letter to you or something?
No, I'm actually thinking, Diane, that that's the responsibility of the select board. That's my gut response.
I very much realize that.
And if you want to
Okay.
speak to us, if you want to speak to us individually, I think each one, at least I can speak for myself, we would be open to that,
Yeah.
Right.
to that.
And also, I think in the past, on the night when we present it, which would be September 23rd, there would be maybe public comment, maybe then,
Okay.
up to the chair.
Look, terrific. I just wondered if there was a device. Thank you for answering the question.
Okay.
Thank you, Diane.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to open
Move
the,
to reopen the public hearing on the grant of location of Concord Municipal Light Plant and Crown Castle LLC for a petition of 133 Old Road to 9 Acre Corners.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Brandy, you're on.
Good evening. My name is Brandy Spazano. I am a supervisor of the New England Division of Network Permitting at Crown Castle Fiber LLC. We provide high-speed data to businesses, hospitals, schools, and the like, and we are currently seeking approval to attach our fiber optic cable to 10 Concord Municipal Light Plant poles in order to service Mass General Brick Incorporated.
Any
Can I answer any
questions?
question?
Any questions from the
The only
board?
question I had was about the reference to needing DOT approval, because it's
We do,
crossing.
we have a DOT permit already.
Oh, okay, great.
So Brandy, I was curious, is this cable connecting to existing cable on a pole, or is it terminating inside 735 Main Street?
Yes, it's terminating at both ends, 735 Main Street and, is it 9?
133.
It's the other address is 133 Old Acre
Okay.
Road. So it's terminating at both ends, and it's not attaching to, it's our own fiber, attaching to the utility poles.
Okay.
Is this fiber for broadband?
Is it a new purpose? Is it new stuff for a new purpose, or is it, what is it?
Yeah.
It is new fiber to service Mass General.
Mass General.
Their offices, do they have, I think, is there a cancer center maybe over there? Our customer is usually fairly broad, so.
The cancer center at the hospital.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So one thing that
Emerson is affiliated
With
members of the board may not be aware of is that Crown Castle has provided service as part of, to Concord Light Broadband at 735 Main Street for some time, so they already have existing facilities in that building and would then be connecting to their facilities in that building to presumably service a client. Concord Light Broadband has typically not engaged with really large enterprise customers because that's actually not their business, being in the residential side, but have shared facilities and facilitated the ability to do those connections for larger providers like Crown Castle.
So I don't believe we have any representative from Public Works or CMLP here this evening, but they both provided a memo in your packet,
Yep.
Right.
and they've outlined several conditions that they'd like to see the
Right.
board
So
approve.
Brandy, do you have that memo dated July 3rd from, with
I
outlining,
don't believe.
outlining these conditions, 10 conditions?
I don't believe so. I've been working with Jeff Cosgrove, but I don't think I have any sort of condition letter or anything like that from him.
Public Works and then CMLP. But there's two letters, right? Are those the two you're talking about?
So
No, there's
we
one
have
letter.
a
July-
June 14 letter from
Right.
CMLP with
Oh, right, that's
conditions,
right.
and a July 3rd
Right,
letter from
okay, right, there are
CPW.
two letters with conditions, June 14th and July 3rd. And I was going to ask if you're agreeing to comply with all of these conditions. But you don't have the memos?
So, Andrea, can you put them on the screen?
This happened
Yeah.
last time with another hearing we had.
Maybe starting with page 186 in the package.
Yeah.
To Andrea from Jeff Cosgrove.
That's internal, but I don't know if it was sent to them.
Well, yeah, see, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why would they not get it?
It would seem an essential part of approving it.
Right, it would, if they don't have it.
But they're not listed on as receiving these two memos.
This doesn't look like we sent it to them.
yeah.
I think Brandy was stepping in at the last minute for Jason and for Jeff.
Okay, so scroll down a little bit, Andrea,
Yeah.
so to the list. So are these conditions familiar to you? Prior to construction, a pre-hearing site visit, poll survey?
Yes, we've actually complied with all of that already.
Okay.
We've done all of that. Yep.
All right, new aerial cable to be installed. Meeting code, basically,
CMLP.
Yes.
remove infrastructure, okay.
Okay, so
There's
those,
another one that has.
Yeah,
and there's another memo.
DPW is right after it. Or-
Yep.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
Whoops, go back up.
no, it's right.
That one.
Yep.
Yeah, so, letter of approval from CMLP, site visit with CPW, remove any infrastructure that's become obsolete, as-built diagrams, This all looks familiar to you?
I've never seen this, but this all complies with everything that's in our license agreement, so I have no issues with any of these conditions. I don't know if you would mind just forwarding it my way just for my records, but I have no issues. We're actually not even at the construction phase yet. Once it's approved by the board, there's a few secondary raises we need CMLP to do, and then we would get their approval before we even install our fiber. So we're not there yet, if that makes sense.
Some of these say that you're going to do these things, so do you agree, like 8, 9, and 10, you're agreeing to notify emergency
Yes.
services and adhere to the construction and tree standards and all of these conditions here? I know it's the first time you're seeing them.
I'm just reading it really quickly.
Yeah, we gotta fix this.
Yes, I comply with those. The residents, I assume I'll just be able to get an abutters list from maybe somebody within the DPW?
Yeah, there's
I don't know
actually
if that's
one in this
Andrea.
packet as well.
It's here.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
So just an aside, Carrie, like, I think there was another meeting with Comcast. We had a similar thing where they had not gotten the memo, so if we could just change the process so the applicant is ready to, thanks.
Okay.
So can we grant the request, like, subject to?
Yeah,
Well, we
that's
can-
what we usually do, subject to adhering to all of these conditions. Great.
Okay.
Yes, that's typical.
Okay.
No issues here.
Are we ready to close the, do we have any, we should take public comments if there are any.
Are there any public comments in the room? No? Online? I don't see any hands
Can't
raised.
see the whole online thing right now.
Oh, stop sharing. Okay.
Okay, good.
Great.
Move to close.
Okay, move to close the public hearing on the grant of location.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
And
motion.
motion to approve the grant of location for Concord Municipal Light Plant Crown Castle Fiber LLC for a petition at 133 Old Road to 9 Acre Corner,
Second.
Subject to,
subject to,
Conditions as
Conditions from the two letters in the.
from
Right, June
CMLP and
14th and July
DPW.
3rd.
right.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you, Brandy.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on the home stretch.
All right.
Discuss,
We're discussing the flag subcommittee.
we are, so take it away, Wendy and
Great.
Cameron.
Yeah, well, I'll just briefly set the stage, then I think I'll turn it over to Wendy, a couple slides. We have a couple of slides that we'll use maybe as part of the discussion. But I guess it's been June 17th when it first came up that we were formed this subcommittee, so it's been great working with Wendy. We've had a number of public meetings. I think we've gotten together 4 or 5 times and had a couple of sort of Zoom working sessions as well. So the intent here tonight is to present what we've found so far, to be very specific and discreet in outlining some options, taking any feedback, and then, deciding, how we want to move things forward. If we can agree on a policy direction tonight, we could then move to, start to draft actual language. But let's go
Sounds
through
good.
the discussion, and we want to get a feedback.
Good,
So,
sounds
Wendy,
good.
I'll turn it over to you to cover.
Okay, and I know you all got this in your package, so what you saw in here, we've done a lot of homework, so we did a lot of inventory.
Yeah,
of
you
what our current
did.
practices are, what flagpoles we have, what flags we
Right.
have. But we also, more importantly, looked at sort of different town policies throughout town. Both Cameron and I did our independent research and ended up coming up with the same observations, if you will. So I won't go through the flag
If you want
details.
to flip to the next slide.
Yeah, go to the defining policy options.
Next slide.
The next slide, Andrea.
Yep.
The next one. Because, that's just background. We have a lot of flags. I don't think we
Yeah,
have to go through all that detail.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is worth just touching on the
Yeah.
previous slide, just to touch on the previous slide on the existing flag policy,
Yeah.
this stuff.
I mean,
Okay.
So-
It was a little enlightening.
We have a lot of,
Not to drain it, but
Yeah.
look, I mean, we not only have a town flagpole. We have 15 other permanent flagpole locations. We also have flagpole holders.
Yep.
We also have holes in the sidewalks.
Yep.
So there's a lot of them.
Yep.
And while we tend to fly basically, you know, the American flag in a lot of places, there's a couple of other places where we're flying, you know, Commonwealth of Massachusetts flag or a POW MIA flag. There's also a couple of days a year where it just seems to be historical precedent, where we fly a United Nations flag 2 days a year in some of the sidewalk poles. And there are some holidays where we fly flags on the flagpole. The U.S. flag is put in and taken down, and some of these other flag holders. So it just gives you a sense that there's actually a fairly large inventory of, you know, various places where we actually put in and take out flags on certain days of the year.
So the scope of your options, is it just for the permanent flagpoles, or
So-
how did you?
It encompasses all of it,
Uh-huh,
and we'll walk through and Wendy
So you
can
thought-
describe what that is. But it will come back to a question of, depending on what type of policy we want to pursue.
Yep.
As to whether it's something that is being, you know, okay, it's not only what flags you might fly is one issue.
Yep.
Other issue is where you're gonna
Where,
fly, on
okay.
the flagpoles. Are you gonna fly them?
Okay.
So that is also a thing,
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see some of that.
yes.
All right, so if we go to the next slide, as we started to say, as we started to look at different town policies, there's certain common themes that came out, right? So we have, some towns have very restrictive policies. They have, you know, X number of flags, and that's all they fly, and they only fly it on a single pole. The sort of second is a larger process where additional flags will fly, and there's usually an approval process that goes with that. And then in this third column, Mary, as you suggested, we wanted to make sure that we were not losing track of current state, so we've sort of kept a current state option here. So, but if we go sort of across these, and what you list, well, I sort of described what the different options were. We give you some examples of different towns that were here, and you know, obviously, we're concerned about the litigation that the city of Boston had from their policy, and we did identify, you know, San Jose had a policy and was, they were identified as a best practice policy, so we looked at their policy, and the city of Boston actually has a good policy now that they've refined. Yeah. But if you start looking at you want to consider why would a town adopt a certain option, we started to list what you're thinking when you're adopting that kind of a policy. For option number one, you know, it might be easier just to have a very limited list of flags that you might fly. And the concern with that is, or the benefit of that is that you're not being perceived of being biased or just choosing one over another. So it eliminates that kind of trouble you could get into. And obviously some towns have gotten into some trouble, and there's been criticism raised on their approach, but a more restrictive one is easier, it's simple, there's no real discretion there. Option two is where you have a policy or procedure where some part of the town is approving, or you have a procedure for receiving requests to fly flags, and then you have a body that's usually approving the policy. Tends to be, you know, those policies usually say we'll always allow a limited number of flags, like you would have an option one, and then there's sort of a second half of the policy where they will fly different flags upon request. And those, you know, policies can be written to clarify the criteria. So different towns have taken different approaches for writing that, but there's always some entity, usually it's the city council or the select board that's approving it. Some require a proclamation, and some towns designate a specific flagpole where they'll fly the flag. Others don't say that. So there's some options that different towns have taken.
So, yeah, so I mean, look, I think Wendy's done a great job of trying to summarize there. I think, you know, you have this first option that tends to be, we're calling it restrictive, right?
Yeah.
Because that tends to say, look, we're gonna fly the US flag, we're gonna fly the state flag and the town flag, and certain military flags. And we're just not going to entertain other
Right.
types of flags being flown. And so you have towns, and we cite some examples here, where people have said, look, this is just what we're gonna restrict it to. When you get into the second option, it's all the ones included in option one, but it's then, okay, what's a process that's a well-defined process for allowing, additional flags to be flown. What we would typically find in those policies is that they generally are, if you're gonna go down that path, that it's typically like flown on one pole for one day type of thing. So, typically the town policies would say, here's a celebratory flag or a other flag that they might call it.
When you say one pole, is it one pole designated for these free speech flags, or is it the pole?
It could be either.
Yeah.
So you have some towns that'll say, we'll put it on the main flag pole underneath the US flag, right? There are other towns who actually have a separate pole.
Right.
That they say, hey, look, we're gonna put a celebratory or, they use a couple of other terms, but
Okay,
event
yep.
or celebration
Yep,
flag
yep.
on a separate pole.
Yep.
That might be, I think the city of Boston has sort of 3 flag poles.
I think the
right? And
national
they have-
park-
They have the US one, the state one, and then they have a third one, I think, where they sometimes fly.
Right. I think the National Park Service does that too. Did you look at theirs?
I didn't look at
Didn't look at
theirs.
the park.
Okay, I think
Service.
that's their
Yeah.
The city of
policy.
Boston, yeah, when they do it, they take one flag down and put the ceremonial flag up.
Hmm.
But different towns, there's a mix of the different
Okay,
towns too.
okay.
Some
So it-
fly at just
so
the
it
city
can be-
hall.
Yeah, so,
or
but
others, yeah.
it's usually one of two things. It's usually below the US flag
Yeah.
Yep,
or on a separate.
okay.
Okay.
Designated.
And really, option 3 is is just another version of option
Right.
2, right?
Right.
It is a policy that we currently have that has a process for making a decision to fly additional flags.
So I'm wondering, based on the research that you did,
Yep.
did you find what you would consider to be glaring holes in our current policy or process that would cause it to not meet the description of well-defined? And if so, what were they?
So it doesn't really recognize all the flags that we do fly. It really
Yeah.
just speaks to the US flag and then other flags,
Yeah.
right? So it doesn't recognize all the other flags. It doesn't give a time frame. One of the issues we ran into, remember when the pride flag came up?
Right.
We got caught off guard. There was no time frame. It's like, what, you want it next week? So that's a problem. And I think the other challenge we found is we
Doesn't
looked at
specify
the
which
policy.
flag poles.
Yeah.
Right.
It's something that, it does talk about expression of town sentiment. Maybe,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's the perfect definite, verbiage to want to go with. So it's not to say that the current policy, we sort of looked at it and said, okay, we sort of get what it's trying to do.
Right.
Our feeling, and Wendy, jump in if I'm saying anything, if we were going to go down, if we decide to go on the option of, yes, we want to have a policy where we allow additional flags to be flown, we think our current policy should be updated to include some of these considerations, such as which poles and what time frame and what is the more defined process.
Yes.
Because oftentimes what other towns have said is, look, it's actually something that you need to, it should be part of a town celebration or part of a
Yep.
town
Or
proclamation.
event or something,
Or
yes.
an event, so that it's just not
Yeah.
anything that we, it should be proposed by a select board member and approved by the select
Saw
board.
that, yep.
So there's just some things that we think, if we were gonna go down that path, that would sort of tighten up our existing
Right.
policy.
Yeah, so that
So-
town sentiment isn't well defined in our current policy, so.
Yeah.
Right.
but it's-
Yeah,
Also, time frame. There's 2 time frames. One is enough time for the requests.
Yes.
Like 30 days. But the other time frame we ran into, one group wanted to
Yes.
fly a flag for 3
Yes.
days,
Yep.
Yes.
and another group
Yes.
for 1 day, and,
So oftentimes it's specified, this is a one-day event.
Right.
The
Yeah.
sort of the typical thing is, you're not gonna fly the same flag more than once in a year, you're gonna fly it for one day. on
Right.
One flagpole.
Right.
Hey, you wanna have a celebration, you wanna have a way of having a celebration,
Yeah.
that's where we'll have the celebration, right? It'll be at one location,
Right.
it'll be for one day.
So I think you guys did a really good job putting this together, a lot of details. And I think option 3 is not really working. That's why we're doing all this. We have some loopholes in option 3 that we need to, you know. So I think option 1 is too restrictive. It's not supporting what we've already voted this year. Option 2 really makes sense to me.
So I think if you just go in, just to make sure we have the
Yeah,
last
the next
slide
slide,
shown.
if you go down.
Just
yeah.
so if people are
Because you jumped
following.
right to the next
Whoops,
slide.
sorry.
That's great. No,
No,
that's
that's
great.
it. That's the
That's
one
great.
that we
I just
want
want to
to-
make sure if people are following along that they can
Right.
see, because
Right.
we tried to summarize on the last slide, just kind of.
Right.
We're trying to say, what would we
Right.
do if we were under
That's
each
right.
one of these, right?
That's right. So-
So restrictive
right.
really reflects everything that we kind of do today on the main flagpoles, on the permanent flagpoles, on a regular basis.
Right.
Um,
Right. So option 1, we tried
Yeah.
to define what, if it's restrictive, these are the flags that would fly.
And there's an issue because it doesn't support
Right.
the Juneteenth or
Right.
Pride. Because
So
of
that-
that,
right.
restrictive tends to be more military, standard state
Yep.
flags, really.
And then option 2 would say, everything in option 1 still applies.
Right.
Plus, here is a process for the.
Right.
We call them ceremonial flags. Here's a process for ceremonial.
Lots of different terms used in these policies. But we do like the idea that, we know it would require select board approval, but we want to tie it to a town event or proclamation. A lot of town policies do that.
Okay.
And, you know, a couple towns, or at least one anyways, that I remember, required sort of select board sponsorship, and actually all 3 of these things are what we would propose here as a
Right.
requirement.
We definitely, I like the 30 days because
Yeah, we need.
staff needs time. It's,
Right.
and we need time to put it on our agenda,
Right, well,
make
that's
the
the
open
challenge.
meeting law, the whole thing.
Well, and if there's a
Yeah.
question, and then you have to come back in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so as we looked at the process of, well, obviously, we talked about the approval sort of process, but the assumption that we sort of looked at was if the flying of the flag is sort of, we would say the Monument Square main flag. I mean, your town center is where people congregate, it's where traditionally citizens come together and celebrate. So that's what's listed here. There are some towns that have a temporary flagpole, so we did want to just recognize that that does occur. We don't have a temporary flagpole. We would have to, if we were going to go down that path, have to do some work to do that. We have many other flagpoles we could use. Personally, I think that the town center Monument Square flagpole is probably the right location. But what you'll see here in this last one is recently with the Pride event, we had additional flags flying on the telephone poles. This policy doesn't necessarily say that we would do that, but that I think is a discussion we want to have too. We didn't, we fly the American flag poles on those, on the light poles, and we did this on the Pride flag. I think that when we flew those I wasn't there at Pride Day, but I do understand that having those flags flying on those was really very well received, and it really helped the celebration, so that we didn't at this time have add anything into this policy. That might be another discussion.
So you're saying that this policy too, the way you have it outlined here, would apply to the main flagpole here?
Well, but it
And
recognizes-
could it also apply to the other temporary
Well,
flagpoles we have? Is
Depends
that,
on how you write the policy.
Right, it could.
So that's, I guess,
Yeah.
part of the discussion, right?
It's kind of
So-
saying,
I think I would be in favor of that.
Well.
What's
so
the
you-
downside? What am I missing?
What's that?
Is there a downside to
The
that?
downside to what?
To saying that the process that we have outlined here regarding what we would fly on the main flagpole would also apply to the temporary flags?
I
So-
guess it's a question of what you're trying to do. So a lot of towns have said,
Yep.
we're gonna fly a ceremonial flag on one flagpole.
Yep,
Like that's sort of, if it's a celebration, that's where it's gonna go.
right.
I guess it's a discussion if you want. Are you saying that, like, so you can write it that way? You can
Yep.
say, hey, our process is we have a ceremonial flag and it flies on this one location.
Yep.
You could write it and say, you can put it on every flagpole in the town.
Right.
You are gonna get into then the different discussion of like who's putting them up, who's taking them down, who's paying the overtime, you know,
Who's paying
okay,
for
the,
'em?
the fire
So-
department's gonna send 2 people and pay them overtime and have them put flags up and down and how many
Right,
flags
so
they
what
have, so.
what I thought we were doing tonight was just giving direction to Kim
Well,
and Wendy.
We are.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're right.
But not deciding every detail like that.
Yeah, I
Well-
mean,
Well, it could be,
as far as we wanna go, right?
I mean, it could be that we would allow it as an additional
Right,
request. I
exactly.
mean, most of this is about what flags do you want to allow? What's the process for
Right.
approving a
Well, it
flag,
seems
right?
silly if we're looking really carefully at what we fly on Monument Street, and then we have streets lined with other flags
Yeah.
that got no discussion.
Well, I think
No,
that,
no, no.
I think we can all recognize the fact that there are certainly some procedural gaps in what's written down
Yes.
today.
Right.
There are things that have been happening by convention. The usage of the street light flag holders, I think is what we're talking about here,
Yep.
is kind of undefined. My
Yes.
understanding is, I
Yes.
think that that's usually done by the light plant when it's done, but I'm not that familiar with exactly what occasions it's traditionally been done for. I see that almost like parade preparation. It's like, I could imagine, some anniversary of Orchard House and we put up Little Women
Happens 12 times
flags,
a year.
stuff like that. Yeah, okay, so I think that it makes sense to clean up the procedural gaps. I think like,
Yep.
as Terry was expressing, I'm along the lines of defining the process, the procedures more clearly, and leaving the policy decisions about, the content, really, what the expression of town sentiment is, in the hands of the select board to be decided, essentially on a
yes,
case-by-case basis.
So,
But I think that better notification, some deadlines that allow, that prevent these things from becoming a paper chase, trying to squeeze things in to the agenda would make it more orderly, and I think it's reasonable to expect that. I also think that we should, before we completely close this discussion, just mention the fact that while we're in this process, we are essentially trying to observe a moratorium on flag requests. So if there's anybody out there who's got a flag request at the moment,
Good
or
point.
is
Thank you.
considering one, we're trying to take a pause on that so that we don't have any in front of us at the moment, and we're trying to decide this process, the
Yeah, good
procedures in
idea.
the abstract at the moment,
Yep, good.
so that we
Thank you for that.
can not be perceived to be picking and choosing based on what's the decision that's in front of us. So we're being intentional about
I
that.
think besides, though, tightening up the process, and I think that's a really good idea, and leaving it to the discretion of the select board, I would like to explore a consistency among this flagpole and the other flagpoles in town. Is that do you think that's asking too much?
no, that's not asking too much. So I think like if I was going down the decision tree, right?
Yep.
So the first decision is, you look at these 3 options at the very top.
Yep.
Option 1, restrictive, option 2,
Yep.
and say like, hey, what do we think as a select board that is the option that we wanna?
Right.
We're coming
So-
into 2.
Right.
Okay, so I was gonna ask, is there any appetite for people like on option 1, the restrictive policy, or do people feel like, hey, we wanna go down a policy where we continue to have a process for flying other flags?
I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
option 2.
Right.
Yes, go ahead.
And then also that we think there are some changes to the current policy that we want to make. So we're essentially kind of saying, look, we want to be in option 2.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to identify a ceremonial flag. I'm comfortable with the notion that there is a singular town ceremonial flagpole, commemorative flagpole that is used for those kinds of expressions. I think that the street light, I think of that more as a decoration for an event kind of thing, and so maybe we want to delve into that as a slightly separate kind of expression, but I think that it does have a place in this and should be defined because it's useful, and I can see why we do it.
So since it's kind of late now, I was thinking
Yeah.
that if we could have Cam and Wendy
Take a stab at that.
do some, take a stab at, debating that and come back to us with language, and we could,
Debating the inclusion of
what to do.
ceremonial flags in
Right.
addition to the.
Yes.
right.
Yes.
And then we can finalize when you have some details.
I want to bring up one, did we talk about, have we really explored the option of a separate flag pole for ceremonial flags?
No, I mean, that's certainly an option,
It's an option.
certainly an option.
It's an option that appeals to me, or it's worth thinking about. So I think that fits into option 2.
Mhm.
So if you could
Right,
also.
so is there a downside, are there costs, is it,
Yep.
capital
Do you have enough
costs?
to move forward?
Yeah, so we'll move forward with option 2. I will express some personal opinion, which is I'm okay with I'm actually okay with either option 1 or option 2, but I'm
Yep.
okay with option 2. I personally do feel like, and from the other flag policies that I've seen, I'm in the camp of one flag, one pole, one day, like not flying flags on all of our
Okay.
town poles all over the
But what
place.
is
and
interesting.
Deciding what gets put up and taken down and all that stuff. So that's just me, but to me, it's like if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it in one place and have it, as a celebration, as a, hey, the town has decided this is something that we're gonna do, and we're gonna put
When you
that
say
there.
one pole, it would be the main pole,
Either on the main pole.
or a separate pole?
Or a separate pole.
Okay, got it.
I'll also say that
Um,
other policies, no other policies reference a lot of ceremonial flags. Like, Concord's pretty unique with our UN flags that we do and the
Yes.
flags. I know, so we might have to do a little more research.
But
Okay.
We can,
Two.
on that, we can go
Yeah.
back and say, look, if
Mhm.
we're going down the option 2, what is the language that we could literally already write,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
And then the choices that will,
Right.
then, the next level choices are,
Right.
is it just one poll for one day?
Yep.
Or are you saying, hey, we want to allow people to put up flags in other locations, right? So that would be one choice. Is it on the town main flagpole, or is it on a separate?
Right, right.
You
Those
see,
would be-
you got it.
Those would be the.
Right.
Great,
Right.
you got the
And
frame.
it occurs to me that it might make sense for us to essentially codify some of the practices that people
Yes.
have come to expect. If we fly the United Nations flags on certain
Yes.
days of the year and have been doing so for a
Yes.
long time,
Yeah.
we should
So we have that.
probably acknowledge
Yes.
So in
that.
addition, we
and-
said in the
yeah.
restricted policy, in addition, United Nations flags 2 days a year on the sidewalk poles. We fly the sister city flag on town handrails when they come in. Okay, so, we can continue those things,
Right.
right?
So that there are some things that are essentially,
Grandfathered.
yeah, and
They're
approved
grandfathered.
without having to come
Yes.
back.
Okay,
Agreed.
grandfathered.
All
Agreed.
right.
Thanks, you guys, for doing this. This is a lot of details.
Yes.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Did you think it would be this complicated?
It's
I did-
always complicated.
So can I
I did.
ask, can I ask a
It didn't
separate
shock
question?
me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do we need to formally vote on a moratorium for requests for ceremonial flags?
We can,
Because
we can.
my understanding is legally we have to follow the current policy.
Okay. Do I have a
I'm
motion?
just thinking, I want to talk about it, I think it makes
Well,
sense.
how
That's
much
fine.
time do you guys need when do you want to come back?
No, we need a moratorium.
Let's
Right.
I think we need
do
one.
this, right?
But
It
is
just-
that,
Good point.
Right, so when are they coming
is
back?
that the right, I don't know.
No, with the moratorium would be as of
We have
now,
to use the current
Until
policy.
when?
until they come back.
Until we come back.
We
until
don't need to know when they're going to come
Okay,
back.
okay.
Okay.
So do I have a motion for a
I
moratorium?
mean, the choices are continue with the existing policy, come what may, if somebody could make a request tomorrow and we don't know what it is, or
Have a
just say
moratorium.
that we're just not going to process any
Moratorium.
requests.
Flying any sort
Yeah.
of ceremonial.
So, good point, Wendy, really. Do you want to make a motion, or?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we hold a moratorium on adding any new ceremonial flags until we are able to reapprove a new policy.
Until we approve a new policy.
Great.
Right.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very
Aye.
good.
Great.
Good.
Good.
I hope that was helpful. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for your work.
We'll put you up sooner in the agenda next time we go around. Okay. Because we're all
We
tired.
got what we needed.
Anything else we need to talk about? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.